All right, we're here with a new episode of Summoning Insight. Took a brief hiatus there during MSI. Had some work to do on the old Counter-Strike with Flashpoint. And
When
so
you say
now we're
brief,
back.
we did miss the entire tournament. It was like 3 weeks long.
It
So yeah,
was,
I'm just saying.
well, I did in fact have 16 broadcast days over the entirety of MSI. So to put it mildly, I probably wouldn't have been able to watch that many games, and the show kind of would have been shit. So instead
Don't
of making
worry.
you
It
a
was
shit
actually
show,
garbage. It was garbage.
it was
There was
garbage from the
literally,
games
there
that I
was
saw.
literally, I'm not even exaggerating. There was three. Well, I guess you have to give my. There was four good teams in the whole tournament, and basically, it's like I said before. They designed a tournament where the majority of the games and the majority of the attention is on the worst games and the worst teams. So it's like, I mean, you're almost objectively the worst TO ever at that point in time. You know, that would be like. I mean, I guess I can't give analogies to sports because unfortunately sports do the same thing, but for very different reasons because they have to cater to markets and franchise. But you don't actually have to do that in League of Legends. That's the maddest part about it. That's the part I've never understood ever, Monty, is Riot has literal God Emperor fucking control. They are like Xerxes in fucking 300. They can just do anything they want. And instead, what do they choose with their mighty powers and their mind and imagination? The most garbage shit of all time. And then I look over, right? Same fucking genre, Dota. Every year I look over at TI and I just go, is this a joke? Like the disparity's mental. Like I'm not exaggerating, guys. Not only, by the way, have the combined prize pools of TI added up to about, I think Worlds would have to run for about 70 more years if they stopped today with TI to reach their prize pool. But even better, I was going to say the format of TI like 3 was better than anything Riot has ever done with Worlds. So if you're a fan of Babby's first daughter, get depressed. Start the show like that. I like to, thing is that my style is I work myself into it. I get going as the show goes. I start in this place and then I raise. I do, Kundalini.
We see the way I look at it, Thorin, is we have to get all your anger out before the guests come on. So we just bleed Thorin dry, clear up his humors a little bit, and by the time we get the guests on, he's in a better mood.
It's actually a theory, by the way, that some like very good writers basically have. I know, I think Neil Gaiman says he does this, where basically what they do is at the beginning of the day, they just let themselves write any old shite that's in there. And the idea is it's almost like you have to like clear out the toxic waste at the beginning, and then you get to the good shit. Then you hit the vein of like, oh, this is good. But then you just chuck away the first 4 chapters or whatever bollocks you wrote. That's like what I do at the beginning. Yeah, I get myself into it.
It's more difficult when you're actually the one producing the toxic waste, though. It has to be constantly cleared out. There you go. All right, about MSI. I'm sure we'll be talking about some of the team's performances with Empyre from Evil Geniuses, who's going to be coming on first. Our second guest is going to be Deficio from Misfits, coming off an incredibly impressive, I would say, 3-0 week. The team looks way better than they did in spring, so I'm very curious about a lot of the changes that happened over there. But I wanted to open up with a topic of conversation that I have not really heard anyone discuss, which is the fact that Riot, they basically franchised co-streaming between spring and summer. And I think this is a bigger deal than people realize, because it moved from having anyone who is part of this league partner program to now just being a select few people who are able to co-stream LCS, which are LS, Doublelift, Sneaky, Meteos, I Will Dominate, Yasuo, and FlyQuest's Spanish stream that they've started up for the Latin American audience because they have Latin American players on their roster.
Yeah.
So that's more of an alternate language stream than a co-stream then. And what I find so interesting about this is clearly like co-streaming is a big issue, and it's a big topic of conversation that's going to be much broader than what we can cover here across the space. Obviously, to tournament organizers, it's alarming that Valorant's viewership, 2/3 of it is on co-stream and not on the mainstream. I think to sponsors, that's pretty alarming. Now, Riot can do that right now because Valorant's not, they don't have partners. It's not a franchise league. Yeah, it's a marketing exercise right now. Yes. So they want to drive people to the game. So like, I get that. It's a bigger problem in a franchise league like League of Legends, where the expectation is not just on advertising for the game, which is co-streaming is a very effective way to use influencers in order to create marketing hype. But when you are trying to sell sponsors, it becomes really blurry because a lot of the sponsor value can't be guaranteed if it's going through co-streamers, and co-streaming is now a really big part of the LCS viewership. And what I find so fascinating about what they've done is that these franchisees in co-streaming, and Riot said, oh, well, we might add more. I'm going to go ahead and guess that they probably won't add more, because these people have a huge amount of influence. And what these are is they're basically golden tickets to millions of dollars. If you have a co-streaming license, it's like Riot is giving you access to millions of dollars of money. It's incredibly lucrative. It's incredibly powerful. There is no ability to compete. So they've removed all possible competition from these co-streamers. And not only that, but it creates multiple other potential issues with these co-streamers, not limited to Riot in the past has banned people like Dominate from the program for things they did off the co-stream, not on the co-stream, which means that
I was playing the game.
Yeah, while I was playing the game. So it's like basically because the trade that is being made is this access and millions of dollars of money. Basically, you can be sure that there is not going to be any Riot criticism at any point in time in any form coming from any of these people. So it's kind of compromised a lot of their content across the board, and you never know what Riot might or might not get mad at you for, and might not, remove this ability for you to make millions of dollars.
I'll give you an example.
Pretty problematic.
I'll give you a classic example from history, because obviously I can remember shit people can't, right? I remember way back in the day, I think it was Travis who said this. It'll be on one of his shows or something, but he once mentioned, because Travis's whole thing is this, right? I noticed Mark C's right in the same cut. That's why they're fucking birds of a feather. What they do is this, right? They go, look, I'll very mildly criticize Riot. Or maybe it's not the best possible thing, but who can really know? And I don't entirely agree. But then when a fan goes like, oh, I think it's really bad, they go like, well, you don't know everything about the situation, and can we really know? And they just basically play this milquetoast little bullshit mealy mouth sort of middleman, but they're not a middleman. They're clearly constantly dragged towards the gravity of Riot like this, right? They just pretend like they're trying to get away, like, stop it. All right. I'm being pulled in, and more money and more attention. So anyway, he basically told a story way back in the day where he made it sound reasonable that Riot effectively, as far as I remember from the story, like silenced Doublelift or reached out to him and said something like, yeah, I can't say this shit in interviews, or maybe they did through CLG, because Doublelift did an interview like super early on. I'm going to say like season 3 or something, where some champion, maybe it was like the end of season 2 when like Draven was going to come out. And obviously listen, Draven is a ridiculous champion, but if you just saw even how it was described, you'd be like, what the fuck is this? And I think it was Draven, because it was one that Doublelift famously didn't play, and hence Maple Street had that game. He like played against him and beat him on it or whatever. So anyway, Doublelift just did some ridiculous thing. Like they asked him like, what do you think of Draven? And he'd never played the champion, never seen it on PvE. I think he just read like the description, and Doublelift was like, yeah, it's shit. Like, listen, I get it. That's not eloquent, and I wouldn't want if I was the game dev, I wouldn't want the best NA player just saying it's shit before he's even tried it. But that's pretty. Listen, he is allowed to say that. I don't know if you're aware of this, but you're allowed to be an idiot. Like it's actually legal. If it wasn't, listen, it'd be a fucking different world right now. And you know what? This is how mad I am in the world. Even though I despise idiots, I'd still let you live. That's actually the sort of fucking grace and mercy I extend to you. So basically, that is the sort of vibe that I get from this, because if you've got a precedent of things like that's the sort of thing you don't want. Right, listen, they can still do a lot of the things they do, LS and Dom especially, but here's the difference. Maybe what they do now is, in some scenarios, maybe there's a clever way to do it. Maybe you just focus that the player misplayed the situation, instead of saying this champion's total shit, this champion's totally broken. Oh, they still haven't fixed it after 4 weeks. Maybe we get less of that. That's what I'm interested to see. Now, I'm certainly not claiming that is what will happen, by the way. I haven't talked to these people. I haven't seen it happen. But again, I'm just saying, if that's not what the point is now, you can very easily do a couple of little tiptoes and you're suddenly there. Like, it wouldn't be hard to, because again, as you say, listen, in a year from now, when they've all seen the millions coming and they all know there's like 7 people get to do this, then if you get threatened to get kicked out, now you have to make the Faustian bargain. It's like, do I? And listen, a lot of people in the world, most of them just won't turn that down, I'm afraid. So it's a clever way to not have to say to them explicitly, don't do this. You just do everything to incentivize them. I'll give you a very quick side analogy. One of the only reasons I've very rarely ever made any kinds of videos about politics, basically, on my side channel, not even my main channel, is because I saw how people just got hit with the fucking demonetization hammer, and it just made me think, look, I'm not really in politics anyway, and my main thing's in esports. I can sort of weave things in there. And yeah, you know what? Maybe in the future if I left these. So listen, it's not that they no one came to me and said, don't do it or we'll fuck you up. But they cleverly made it so it was like, Well, I'm not doing videos just for free, guys. Like, I actually want to do it. I would like to make a living off it as well, you know.
Yes.
If I just talk for free, I'll just fucking turn the camera off, look in a mirror, have a brilliant conversation with audience, whatever. You get the premise.
But yeah, I mean, the thing is that concerns me about this is that the new program, because it has drawn these creators even closer to Riot, it basically compromises all content across the spectrum. So it's not just the LCS co-stream, it's everything they do in game. It's everything that every piece of content that they make outside of that, even about other regions. So it really is a very, and you know what, it even compromises content that they receive from Riot. So for example, league partner people receive information such as patch notes before everybody else does, before it's released to the public.
Really? I mean, that's mega valuable, by the way, to someone like LS, who obviously is a guy.
I mean, how do you think those videos come out 10 seconds after the patch notes are released, right? It's all coordinated. And so they lose access to this form of information that makes them significant amounts of money. And I'm not faulting the content creators here, to be clear. I'm just saying that this process, there has been a trade that has been made via the franchising of co-streamers that has resulted in a lot of their opinions now being compromised in a certain way. Not about the game in particular, but maybe about the scene. And in a way, you're going to hear a lot less, pushback along certain things when it comes to Riot. The other cause for that I find very interesting.
Let me ask you this, though. Let me play devil's advocate a second. Like, basically, the question I would say is this, right? If we take Riot out of it, who I just think are scumfuck pieces of shit, all it is just shit rolls downhill. It's a rotten tree that produces rotten fruit. Go read your Bible. It's like Matthew fucking 13:7 or some shit like that. Basically, there'll never be anything good come out of Riot, except accidentally. Basically, the question would be this, right? If I take the Riot part out of the equation, look, it is entirely their right. Like, they have total rights to the stream. Absolute IP rights were decades from that ever changing. And in the world where they have absolute rights, they can obviously give no one co-streaming rights. They could do what a lot of tournaments do. Like, we're the only stream, we're the only game in town, right? So in theory, there is a benefit, the idea they're putting out there. Like, for example, I'd much rather watch Dom and LS do these streams than I would the Riot broadcast. So for me, as a viewer, I actually get a benefit. So my question would be this, right? How much of it is like, in theory, you would agree with that. Like, for Flashpoint, in theory, we let people co-stream when we were there. But if someone had been a complete arsehole, we might have said, fuck you, then, you don't have a right. It's a privilege, not a right, essentially. I
don't know if I would have cared, frankly.
Essentially, are you arguing that, like, either no one should have co-streaming or anyone should allow co-streaming?
So here's my solution, because it ties into another problem that exists, which is that, so if we look through the list of approved co-streaming, like LS is signed with T1, Dominate is signed with Cloud9, Doublelift is signed with TSM, Yasuo is signed with 100 Thieves, right? So my point is that when it comes to partnerships with the LCS, just purely from a league perspective, one of the potential issues that comes up is, well, because these people are signed with LCS teams, or other League of Legends teams, the value that they get from representing these teams. So, for example, if you're TSM and you have Doublelift, well, you're basically double dipping. You have the value to sell to sponsors of TSM, is in LCS, but then you also get to add the metrics from Doublelift streams in order to do sales. So, in a way, this process has also advantaged certain teams within the LCS and given them a more powerful tool to make more money in order to get better players, which results in a competitive advantage as well. So
which is outrageous when you consider it's a league with 10 teams, and in theory, if you're the TO, you treat them all equally, right? Because as you're saying here, one of the speculations I would have about this is awfully convenient the names that got picked, wasn't it? It wasn't just like anyone. Because here's the thing, Monty. One of the problems, I think this is one of the reasons why they all cry about the import rules as well. One of the things that those guys didn't realize would happen eventually is because anyone can get a few million in VC. All of a sudden, like, in theory, if it wasn't for the fact they're incompetent, like the 9th and 10th best team could also get like very good players, and they can compete in the game in many similar ways. They can all get the same scenario, right? So how can we get advantaged again? Because as my old pal Richard used to always point out, there is like an inner circle in the LCS. He calls it the Three Kings, which is like Reggie, Jack, and fucking Steve Arhanset, right? And if you notice, a lot of things that Riot does seem to always advantage these guys. It's when they need something. It's when they don't like something. So, like, these are the movers and shakers, right? Well, the problem is if I'm those guys, look, I could could just compete straight up and win by being better, but that's not the American way, is it? What you do instead is you exert your power and influence, and you just get basically the government to change the regulations to fuck everyone not called you, but in other words. So in this scenario, if TSM's competing against whatever team doesn't have it, let's say, I don't know, fucking Dignitas or something, I don't know where all these people are going, then Dignitas is at a competitive disadvantage just sponsorship wise now compared to TSM. TSM's just being given like a boost up effectively.
Yep. And the problem with this too is that there's no chance to compete, right? So the thing is because it's been franchised, it's very difficult because you could do a live view of the stream, right? But you're never going to get as many viewers as somebody who can co-stream with the game right on the stream to make it easy, correct? And then even so, you're disadvantaged to co-stream or live view LEC because the people who are popular from LCS are going to have a live viewing advantage as well when it comes to LEC. So they've killed the competition in the market in terms of co-streaming. So that's a concern as well. But the way I would do this is I would say, you know, if you're an LCS team, you get a certain number of co-streaming licenses because there's no chance for other teams to even compete right now. They've either been forced to compete over the current co-streamers and dole out a bunch of money. Again, it advantages the people who have co-streams right now because it just makes them even more valuable because of scarcity in the market. And it doesn't allow the teams who don't have co-streamers to kind of build up their own brand identity in partnership with a co-streamer. They don't have that option. So in my mind, what makes the most sense is for each LCS team to have a certain number of co-streaming licenses that they can distribute at their will to try and sign influencers so that they can at least compete in the co-streaming and have a fair shot at the same level of sponsorship and viewership, right? Because it's just anti-competitive right now. Just purely.
Well, another thing as well to say here is like, look, I totally agree with the idea that you can, especially if you're the guy who has the IP rights, you can be very selective about who gets it. Like, for example, you wouldn't want to give one to someone who was going to be massively critical. That's all they're going to do. Or obviously it spread like, you know, fucking nonsense they've made. Yeah, there's certain people you wouldn't want to potentially do it. You wouldn't want to just open the floodgates. But like one of the issues I have with doing this approach is, where was I going with that? Let me think. It's that essentially to a fan, what they'll never understand, the biggest psyop, the most successful psyop, in my opinion, in human history, is actually that they convinced normal people that companies only act in self-interest to make money. Now, that is factually, if you look at the actions of most massive companies, powerful people, they don't do that. They don't do that at all. Like, obvious examples would be media, right? My field. There are certain stories that are very edgy. They would get fucking mad views. They would go viral. They don't publish those stories. Now, they don't get anything for not publishing them, as far as we know. So in this particular scenario, right, if Riot just wanted max viewership, you open it to all the big names. You'd actually hunt people down. You'd go, Scary, you want to come back to League of Legends, mate? You can come in. Void, of course. Yeah, everyone. Shin. Well, maybe not him, you know, for obvious reasons. Back in the day, of course, if we had a fucking DeLorean, you get the name, you'd get all of them in. You'd get as many as you could. But that's the one thing about Riot that I nailed years ago because I knew from behind the scenes. They almost never act to just maximize the money, the views, because here's the thing, they've got enough. At least they didn't in Tencent. They've got enough, and they've got enough. So then they go, right, we'll go up to here to make the money and the views, and then everything past that, just us controlling whatever we want to control. So we choose who we want. Then it's just then it's being a king. You just capricious things here and this, and I changed my mind, but no, I'm going to punish this guy. They will always go to that if you notice. If you ever look at how they act. So as you say, one of the other things about this is now those people also do have like the sword of Damocles hanging over them. They better not fuck up because that'll get revoked real quick.
Yeah. And you know, the other thing that's really crazy is, you know, we've seen more and more of the casters. And I look at this from a caster perspective too, which is here's an objective truth right now, guys. There is no caster that is capable of making as much money in any game as someone who has co-streaming privileges to the LCS. It is impossible. It is impossible. Co-streaming LCS is one of the most valuable things that you can have right now. And even as more and more of these Riot casters go freelancers, you may scratch your head and think, well, that's weird. They're not even working all of the days. They're not even working all the days. Why can't they co-stream on their off days? Why can't the LEC casters co-stream on the LCS?
I'll give you the obvious answer.
I mean, no, just think about it. They're Riot approved already. They're on the official broadcast. Why shouldn't they be?
Shall I give you my rate?
Of course, I think you know we know what the answer to that is, but go for it.
Well, then they could have incredible leverage over Riot in terms of appearing on their broadcast. Like, what if someone? So I think Cadrill's an obvious example. You think
who has announced co-streaming LCK
yeah.
today, by the way, Cadrill.
Jack, when he used to be working on the broadcast, you go back in time, maybe Deficio when he still used to be on it. Guess that's going to come on now. Papa Smith, the big names. Mate, I'm not fucking around right now. You'd have to build it up. But if Papa Smithy said tomorrow, actually, you know what? Stuff 100 Thieves. I'm going back to Korea and I want to be a co-streamer of LCK. Mate, again, he would make so much more that it's like if you want him to actually cast LCK, you're in for trouble. And then secondly, remember, it's not about hits. This is why I'm going to show you it. He would get more views on the English language stream than the English language stream would. I'm telling you right now. Listen, I love Atlas, but he ain't Papa Smithy. And in terms of like fan appeal, what he's built up already, like essentially they would have too much leverage. And if one thing has been shown by your career, it's that Riot does everything they can to give away as little of the leverage as possible.
Yeah. And here's the thing is that Riot still needs casters to appear on their broadcasts.
Otherwise, their broadcast just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and goes down and down and down and down.
But if I'm a caster right now who's working with Riot, I'm looking at these co-streamers and being like, wait, Riot, you just gave these people multi-million-dollar licenses, but I've been working for you for 8 years and I can't get in on that. Like, even though I'm a freelancer now, I'm not allowed to do it on the days that I'm not working the league. Or if I'm in LEC, I can't do it when LCS is going on potentially, right? You know, LCS, most Sundays, LEC is not running and LCS is, but there's no indication that these casters are going to be able to do that, because if they start to have their own following, they will, you know, potentially leave the broadcast and do that full time. But I mean, this is, and I'm not saying there's a good solution to this, but this is a very critical moment in esports history where this is going to come to a head, right? It's not just in League of Legends. It's definitely in Valorant. It's definitely in Counter-Strike and other major esports, which is what are the kind of industry standards going to be, and where do the top casters go? Do they go to their own streams when allowed? But it's a scenario where, you know, I feel bad for the Riot casters right now, because I think it's a really tough situation to have dedicated many years of your life to a game and then not be able to do what other people have done, and the company that you work for giving licenses to certain people that are just insanely lucrative. I mean,
without going longer, because obviously we're going to bring the guests on, I'll just say this. If fans don't realise, even with some of the things Monty fought for, which I've always said was like the older brother syndrome, where they fucked up with him, so then they had to give the other ones the things that he wanted, because it was the only way to make it not seem like it was just about him, and then make it, oh no, we're giving you guys it. So basically, the main problem I see is they're in a scenario where I actually don't think that those Riot casters will ever know until they retire. They'll look back and go, so I did like 6 years of LCS, I did MSI, I did some Worlds, and I made this much at the end. What the fuck? They're going to have made like a couple of million each, at most, by the way, for that kind of period of time. Then they'll look over.
We're talking about like a long period, guys. Long period.
Will have made like $30 million or something, like $20 million. Yeah, it'll be ridiculous, because those guys were always underpaid. If people don't know, I've said this in the past and people think I'm joking. I think it was in 2015 or something, Monty, because it was the first year I did like all the events I could. Or maybe it was 2016. It's actually 2016, because I had like my league contract. I remember you telling me how much like Jat and those guys made like off their Riot deals. And I was like, but I make more than that casting or analysis in CSGO, and that's my side hustle. That's my side hustle, man. That's not my main job. Like, so I don't think people realize, like, this is one of the reasons why, again, tangential, but I don't believe when Riot says things like, you know, when they get caught in something, they always go, oh, that we know it was wrong and we're going to change our culture. No, never changes. It's always like, we're the kings, we have all the control, so we exploit you, and maybe if you do a good job with some leverage, we'll give you a little bit back. Yeah, if we have to give some ground, we'll give some ground, but then it's never a partnership with you, right? It's like that shit in fucking, like, basically, it's like that thing from Lord of the Rings, isn't it? Like, Sauron doesn't share power, Saruman, like, that's the problem, isn't it? Like, you think you're getting some power, you're not. Let's see where it goes. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I find this whole scenario so interesting, and it's not that I have a good solution. I'm really concerned about what it means for the entirety of the esports industry, because just as an aside, I prefer, you know, listening to the official stream a lot of the time as a caster myself. I like the production value. I like the professionalism that occurs. And so I enjoy seeing that, but I also understand that options are good for people. Obviously, Riot agrees. That's why they've implemented these. I mean, I think that basically they would have blocked all co-streaming, but the the clapback would have been enormous from the community.
Oh, yeah. They do care for some reason what Reddit and Sarah think, so they would definitely be like 2 weeks of crying. By the way, one thing to quickly explain, because you didn't explain that, but you take it for granted. One of the reasons why Monty says that, so I'll give you an example. Here's why I like to watch Dom and LS, but here's why Monty wouldn't, is because I don't actually know the game on a super analytical level. So I want to see like what opinions they have, what they're telling me. Does it make sense? If you're Monty, right, I know this because it's the same in CSGO. In CSGO, I don't watch the commentary. And the reason why is it just gets in the way of me thinking my thoughts. Like my thoughts, in my opinion, are more advanced and better than the casters. So I want that out of the way in a way. And I just want to think of my own thoughts of the game. I want to take it fresh with no one loading up my perception. So I can understand actually when you say that, why you might not want to do it, why you want to watch the bog standard broadcast, you know.
Yeah, and also, you know, I often watch VOD, so I'm like skipping around like crazy and not really listening to it, right? So yeah, I don't know. I hope that, you know, this comes up with a solution. You know, as a tournament operator myself, like I just let anybody co-stream Flashpoint, but it's also not at a level where the significant amount of the viewership is coming from those co-streams. So I don't have the same potential issues because the majority is still like on the main broadcast. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting conundrum, and we'll take a look at it going forward. But I think like franchising it really leaves a lot of questions about the availability for the other partner teams, the other franchise teams with Riot, in order to kind of benefit from that, or at least have the opportunity to compete to benefit from it, as well as what happens to casters. Like I know Papa Smithy and I talk about this a lot, you know, but what is the future of esports casting, and is it just co-streaming? Like, is there going to be an official channel in the future, or are these companies just kind of opening it up to everyone, or at least people that get approval? It's going to be interesting in the next few years, to say the least. That said, we're going to wrap up our intro here because we want to get Empyre from Evil Geniuses on the show. We're going to start talking about LCS, and we will have Deficio a little bit later on. So we're going to take a quick break while we get Empyre on, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. We're back, and joining us is Empyre from Evil Geniuses. Now, people might be more familiar with Peter Dunn, who came over to Evil Geniuses, you know, somewhat recently, or Artemis. What is your role, Empyre, at Evil Geniuses to start things off?
Long story short, I'm a bit of like a Swiss knife for EG. In season, I help out with our 3 league teams in LCS, Academy, Amateur, with scrim and match preparation. So stuff from like draft preparation to VOD research to solo queue data and all in between. Off season, I help EG with scouting and player recruitment. Last off season, I also helped set up our amateur program, which has been pretty successful so far. So yeah, a bit of a Swiss knife.
Does that mean, or infer, that you were involved with this Danny guy coming in to replace Deftly?
Yes, 100%. When I created the amateur team, he was one of the first people that I wanted to pick up. He's someone who I've been following since 2019, when he used to be known as Dan Kaisa. He used to duo with Tarzan, the popular NA streamer, and helped Tarzan get the highest LP before Core JJ recently got the highest LP on NA Challenger. But yeah, he's someone I've been following for a really long time, and I really like his potential. And the skill that he's already been showing on stage.
There's some good games to show.
Yeah, and also replacing Deftly was a bit of a no-brainer. I don't know how many chances this guy is going to get. It seems kind of ridiculous at this point in time.
Here's the thing, Monty. I know how to explain this. Deftly's a smoke show, right? You see him, you go, fucking hell, he's not bad. What? No one else wants him. I wouldn't kick his ass out of bed. But you know what? You date him for 2 weeks, and he goes, fucking nothing going on between the ears here. You know what? I've got to have something more substantive in my relationship. Sex isn't all it's about, you know. And then everyone has to go through the phase of 2 weeks of Deftly. Everyone just does okay, or a split in half, whatever it is, you know. So.
Yeah, I mean,
You have to say it's up to you.
To be fair, like Deftly does have his strengths.
It's not your
In terms
team.
of like, I mean, like he has really good laning. Like last split, in terms of lane, we were probably had one of like the best lanings, bot lanes in the league. But he wasn't able to capitalize on some of the early leads we got when it came to like team fighting, and that's something that we ended up. One of the reasons why we ended up
AD carry then, isn't it? Because that's sort of the role. It's about capitalizing on leads and winning the game late, isn't it? So
yeah, I mean, like he definitely knows how to team fight on like skill based ADCs, stuff like Jin and Kaisa. So champions
So it wasn't the
that use
right
skills,
meta then as well. Okay.
yeah, but like it kind of limited our draft style, and we wanted to expand that to include more champions that were more auto based, and you can champions
Okay.
that need to space more.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons. And then the
Okay.
other reason, like people forget that if you read the news at the time of the off season, that definitely wasn't our first choice
Right.
in our list. So there was some stuff that happened there last minute. Past when the free agency opened up. So by the time we end up needing to get like a replacement ADC as a starter, a lot of the ADCs that were on our list, like 2, 3, 4, already signed to other teams.
Is
And
one of them a core streamer
Batman
now?
Jack. Just one
Is one of them a core streamer now?
Not really.
Oh, okay. Just wondered. Anyway, by the way, you not bad. You playing some decent defense there to start with. You know.
Yeah.
Pump faked a few
Batman-
times, but you're doing a good job. Well done.
Badman Jack would not sell them king. So, you know, that another problem there in the end.
Yeah.
Maybe after a
I mean,
split.
that's
Maybe
one
next
of the
split.
problem. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to start focusing more on development and setting up the amateur program, as well as like put more focus into creating a better infrastructure for our academy team, because the NA economy is really ridiculous right now, and
Yes.
it's been going on for a few years now, and it keeps getting worse. And I think every org needs to learn to become more self-sufficient and not rely on being able to make trades with other teams right now, because the demands are way too high. It's crazy. Like orgs need to be self-sufficient unless there's some way we can limit these, like the numbers and buyouts that orgs have on players.
Basically, you can't keep paying Jack like $1 million and then him just rolling up 4 of those motherfuckers and just buying like the best European player, and then everyone, but we paid him and now he's better with our money. Like that's just how it works at the moment, boys. It's just how it works.
Yeah.
Or Jack offering you the package deals where he's like, well, you asked about this one
Oh,
player, but I'm
yes.
going to force you to have these other players as well so that I can guarantee that you're not going to be as good as me.
Yeah, the trades are not very fair.
Yeah. No, it should be a meme. You know, everyone did that shit meme of like, I offer you this. There should just be some Jack ones out for the off season because he's got some outrageous fucking trade offers.
Yeah.
And there's always some buyer in town, I notice. If it's not the big ones, he'll just get some, you know, guy, Jack's offering me some good. I've just come into the LCS and he's such a friendly guy. He's trying to offer me play. Like, listen, mate.
Yeah, and obviously, like,
I like how Jack is like the GM of like half the teams in the league.
Basically, here's the analogy, Monty. Jack's that fucking guy on that episode of Rick and Morty where he's like secretly the devil and he's running that curiosity shop and he sells you the most awesome shit ever, but it's all cursed. But it's like, you always think it's worth getting, but it's always cursed. So it's like, you know.
Yeah. And if an org doesn't have the proper like guidance with people who had history in the league and in the LCS and knows all these players and what they can bring to a team, they're gonna kind of get baited or be attracted to these kinds of offers because they don't know, because these players were at the top of academy, or these players did really well on a top 3 LCS team. They went to Worlds, etc. So I don't. There's just like for new orgs, they don't really have the experience or the people around the infrastructure yet to be able to like make the best decisions out of the gate.
I'll tell you right up now. I'll tell everyone who's a new org that ever comes into LCS, don't pay 4 million for Hooney. Give me 1 million. I'll tell you, don't spend the other 3 on Hooney. And then I'll start telling you, I won't even tell you myself who, but I'll just go and then give another 500k to one of my guys here. Someone like you, but you're already in EG, so it's too late for you, mate. I'll give it to, one of my guys, and then they'll give you the right teams. We'll stay. It's only $1.5 million you spent already there. But you could also, just like people with Deathly, you could also have your year with Hooney. I mean, that's another ritual, apparently, to be in like the LCS. Apparently, you just must have Hooney for 1 year. Okay, whatever. You guys did it, so fair enough. You got that out your system. You're doing a good job. You got Deathly out your system. You got Hooney out your system. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's Hooney is really the initiation procedure for new GMs in the league, where you just play hot potato with Hooney. Hooney, who's a complete baller and his own agent, by the way.
Yes.
You're like, would you like a Hooney? Hooney's like, you definitely want this Hooney for $1 million. And everybody's like, wow, did he play on SKT? I've heard SKT won 3 world championships. I've heard of them. Man, he must be good. then they just pay the $1 million for Huni straight
So,
up.
dude, here's one area I'll actually give them credit for. One sec. I don't really, because as I said, if you have that much money, you can just hire someone who can tell you what you're doing, mate. Like it's not a fucking mystery. It's not starting out in the stock market. In this scenario, you can just ask Warren Buffett what you're doing, mate. Like that can be done. But the problem is this, right? If you're from sports, you're going to get fucked by a concept. I should do a video on this, really. In my opinion, 1 year in esports, 5 years in sports, because players just fall off the boil so quickly. Teams change completely. The meta changes. The game changes. The scene changes so rapidly. So the problem is, if I said the years there, though, Monty, to a guy from sports, like 2015, he was considered one of the best players in the world as a rookie. 2017, he won MSI and LCK, like you say, made the world's finals. That sounds like, that wasn't that long ago. It's only a few years. Maybe we should give this guy a try. It's like, mate, that may as well be a whole career away. Like, there's players that have like retired since then who probably started 2 years before. So to me, that's the problem. It's easy to get baited if you don't know the space in that sense. Like, your time isn't the same in esports.
Yeah, there aren't many players that can withstand the grind of esports. Like players that come to mind are like Impact or Core JJ.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Impact probably the best example ever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but most aren't able to like be there for several years.
Here's a question: is Impact currently the longest playing active player in the world?
Probably, because season
I think
2
he
till
is.
Now. Yeah.
I mean, it was before. It was before season 2, even really. I think.
When did Afremu start?
That's true. Afremu is definitely up there, but
okay, that could be true.
It's
that could
close.
be Afremu, actually.
It's
and
close.
then SoAS. Oh wait, SoAS isn't playing anymore.
SoAS is a coach moment, yeah. He should be, but unfortunately, he fucked his whole career and ended up as a coach. But
we'll talk about why he definitely should be on this Vitality roster later,
sure.
because it's actually appalling to me that he's not on that roster. I was thinking about it while I was watching the Vitality games. I'm like, why isn't SoAS here? He would be absolutely perfect for this team. But we'll get to that in the LEC segment a little later on. Yeah, it probably is Afro or Impact, because Impact used to be a support player back in the day. Yeah. Before Champions really even started, he was in some of those early tournaments. So it would be close. It would be very close at the professional level between.
The problem is, I forgot, Monty. Technically, you are right. Technically, Afremu did play that long. Some would say he took a few splits off. Still did play.
He has remained continuously active, even if you may not have been able to tell during some splits of his play. Dude, but recently he's been good again.
Yeah, he probably told Doublelift about 6 years ago, spring split doesn't matter. It just took that long to rattle around Doublelift's head till he thought it was his own fault. He's like, like the Cambrian mind or whatever. Doublelift's like, was that me talking to myself? No, his Afro said that about 6 years ago when he was on CLG, mate.
So I want to talk about EG, because I am. First off, I think it's great that you guys are testing out Danny instead of, going through the same motions of recycling deftly for the ultimate time. He's like in his 6th recycled iteration where he's been broken down and put back together into the deftly plastic water bottle one more time. But I think it's time to put that one in the trash can moving forward. And we've seen a lot of LCS teams starting to experiment with young up-and-coming players. Obviously, we've seen that with Fudge, some of the other Oceanic players. Teams seem, Immortals has a lot of these new players as well. Teams seem more interested in trying out true rookies rather than going through the veteran recycling program that they have been engaged in for a number of years now. And you mentioned earlier that that's part of your job and why you wanted to put Danny in there. Do you think LCS is coming along in that regard? And what are your goals at EG for doing that?
Yeah, I think more teams are starting to. I mean, a part of it is because of like the LCS economy, and a part of it is that some of the veterans are beginning to retire, or that teams kind of have negative stigma. Like these players kind of have negative stigma around them, and some are warranted and some aren't. So, for example, like Doublelift retired recently, Sneaky is basically retired, Meteos is basically retired. So there's a lot more room in the LCS. And then you see like some of the veterans now in Academy, Hansor, Cody Sun, to name a few. And so that leaves up a lot more room in the LCS for the new players to come in. I think a part of it is with intention. So with like C9 and Fudge on EG with us, with Danny, a part of it is kind of because like they either are lacking in funds like Golden Guardians, or because of seeing the Oceanic region being part of the LCS residency now. So you want to try out these players that you think might be better than current NA talent. So stuff that Immortals is doing right now. and a lot of academy teams have also imported Oceanic players like TLA. But yeah, in terms of EG, yeah, like that's one of the big reasons is because you guys were talking in the pre-show about how the big three kind of have a lot of what's the word, like power in terms of like grabbing talent. So trying to chase them in the short term is very, very difficult unless there's like a perfect opportune time in the off season and you shell out a lot of money. And by a lot, I mean a lot, because it's also going to require like buyout money, not just contract money. So for me, it makes a lot of sense to think more long term and try to recruit the best prospects, not just in NA, but also wherever in the world. And also at the same time, also bring in the best coaches that can develop these players. So one of the big things that happened last offseason is Peter Dunn became a free agent. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, we have to get this guy in. He fits what we want to do.
Obviously.
And then another lucky thing that happened is Kelsey Moser also became a free agent. I'm like, we have to get her into our org as well. And she's mostly working on the business side, but she on her off time, she's been helping out with one-on-one coaching and kind of like helping us create like a good development syllabus and helping out developing our coaches on the academy and amateur side. She's been a big help in that regard as well. But yeah, that's basically what I've been trying to do in EG so far, and I feel like we are going in a right path. Like last split, our academy team ended the regular split as a 10th place team with a bunch of like new faces, and then in Proving Grounds they were top 4. We also had our amateur team, which was mostly of like bunch of teenagers who barely had any competitive experiences on the amateur level, make it to top 6. They beat like 3 different academy teams during that split. So I'm really happy with the direction we're going, and I'm really excited for the future for AG in that regard.
Has there been more cooperation between the LCS teams when it comes to the amateur circuit and providing these opportunities? Because you're not the only one who's like 100 Thieves has announced that they're doing this. TSM has announced that they're doing this, not only fielding the academy teams, but fielding the teams below that, which, like you say, are usually like high school kids who are in a kind of a development pipeline. Are these teams playing against each other? Are they competing in any meaningful way?
Yeah, they're usually in there are 3 different tournaments in each split, and you get points based on how you place in each of these tournaments. And if you get enough points, you get into Proving Grounds, and Proving Grounds is where you get to face the academy teams. So that's where you get like the best competition for your amateur players. Last split, it was our team on Evil Geniuses, our Evil Genius Prodigies, our amateur team, and Dignitas's amateur team made it into Proving Grounds. And yeah, the split, we just finished our first tournament. We had a couple of LCS amateur teams make top 8 in the first tournament, and then the second tournament is about to begin very soon. But yeah, these teams, depending on where they place in groups and the bracket stage, they get to face against one another. Otherwise, they'll face other amateur teams that are more veteran. So there's an amateur team with Arrow. If you guys still remember Arrow.
Yeah, I saw him announce that on Twitter. I'm loving it.
Yeah, he's playing for an amateur team with like a bunch of academy veterans like Dokla and Winston, for example. And then there's another team with like Tuesday and Wiggly. So yeah, there's a lot more veteran players who used to be in academy or even LCS that are now playing in amateur right now, and that really helps the amateur scene. Yeah.
Right, basically, obviously now they've fucked with the whole like you can become an NA resident thing a million times over the years now. Is there still like a certain time requirement before you can then get the green card and then become like a resident at this point? How does it work currently? Because for example, on your team, the obvious one's Igna. Like how much longer or what does he have to do to become an NA resident if you wanted to?
He'd have to apply for a green card, and then the green card process depends on like each person. I think
it's kind of random.
A lot of things are taken into account. There's like the bureaucratic randomness, and then there's also like how long you've stayed in and worked in America, and then there's also like I think they also take into account like accomplishments and kind of like
your fame.
Your fame, your importance to the industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the problem is, right, listen, you're talking a great game about that. You've got Peter Dunn, who's done amazing work in Europe, bringing up rookies. The problem is this, mate. When I looked at your team, just external, and I saw that lineup even when Definitely was there. I cynically said, right, you've got Import, any resident, you've got Svenskeren, any resident. Jiizuke hasn't been there for a while, but whatever. Mid laner from Europe, that's a pretty good import spot to take, by the way. I looked at Igna, I was like, he's been there a few years. To me, it's the opposite. I didn't think they're going for young players. They're just waiting until Igna pop, and then they get in the other European player, and they have the Exodia, like, there you go. Oh, NA, we're an NA team, you know, like that's not anything on the horizon.
I don't like. It depends. Like in every offseason, I would say like obviously the main roster isn't full of young talent. Obviously now we've incorporated Danny, but that's mostly like what I said earlier in the show, that the buyouts were just too high for the best academy players and the best NA talent on other teams, which is why we decided to go a bit more cost effective with veterans that can perform really well on the LCS, while making sure we can build up for the future, so that when it comes to the future off seasons, we don't have to make that choice between like buying millions for a team's NA player. Because like the most important thing for an LCS team is how good are your resident players, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Well, it's also the fact that, I mean, look at this. I mean, if we take China and Korea and Europe into account, the reason why they've always, or not always, but they started to develop kind of good natural talent, especially Europe and China, was because they increased the competitiveness of their amateur circuits, and then they waited a few years. Like, we've been over this before. You know, it's not like, oh, all of a sudden China won Worlds. It was the Shy was taken to China when he was a teenager from Korea, put in China for a number of years, and only in 2018 did IG win Worlds. And he was a Korean player. And then we've seen more and more Chinese talent develop from the farm systems that they have. EU Masters, a great example of a system that was built and then it took a few years to come online. And ultimately, that's what is going to fix the problems in NA, because people don't realize this, but when you start to make more and more and more of these amateur teams, all of a sudden solo queue at the high level, at the challenger ranks, starts to become filled with more and more and more players who are actually there not to troll, but to get better. And it's not going to be full of streamers anymore. And it's not going to be full of one tricks, because these are people who are competing even in solo queue in order to get better with a hope towards a professional spot, right?
Yeah.
So that's what actually changes things.
This year. Yeah, and the amateur circuit is a lot more competitive and a lot better for the youngsters to learn in right now, because not only do you have chances to compete with academy teams, but you also have veterans with LCS and academy experience playing in those leagues now. So lastly, you had Zazel, and you had like Viper and Anda. Now you have Arrow, and these guys help elevate the amateur scene. It's the same way how the regional leagues in Europe were elevated, because they were because you see more veteran, like Cabochard is now playing in regional leagues, and Max
Yellow Star Wars, a whole bunch of people.
And they elevate solo queue. This is why I thought Doublelift's video on the ping was so ridiculous, right? Because here are some facts that Doublelift didn't bring up. Well, 2/3 of the US population lives on the East Coast of America, like in the two time zones, Central and Eastern, that are closest to the server. So really, the amateur talent, when it was in LA, whereas all the way on the West Coast, most of the possible talent that could be developing on the East Coast had horrible ping. Horrible. So, and meanwhile, there's a solution that you've already discovered for the professional players, which is scrims and in-houses, which you can do on 0 ping. So the fact of the matter is that the amateur scene needs to develop in solo queue, and moving the server there to closer to the East Coast is objectively good for the development of those players. And the professional players have an ability already to practice on low ping environments.
Actually, funny. It feels like more the NA players who have made it to like academy and LCS in recent history are mostly from the East now. Like,
like that's just statistically more likely, dude. It's just because there's so many more people on the East Coast of the United States and Canada. And here's the other thing, guys. Here's what else Doublelift missed. You remember when the server was in LA? It was in LA for many years. Was NA doing well at international competition during those years? Oh, they weren't. They still sucked. So not sure that matters. Like, I mean, it does matter, but it's a tiny part of it. It's good, like completely ridiculous.
Yeah, like ping is more about maximizing rather than the solution. It's like maximizing trading, but it's not like what's making what's going to make the region better.
And by the way,
that's more about the culture and the training.
We default to this story, but Thorin can tell you an amazing story about Korean Counter-Strike when there was no one to practice against and very high ping. Do you know what the Korean team did? They practiced macro strats. And then they were good. Yep. Right, Thorin, you want to tell the story?
Yeah,
it's pretty incredible.
No, the craziest part that people don't understand is like, in the same way as a lot of games have like a minor Korean presence because there's just so many people trying to be pro there, Counter-Strike, basically the original Counter-Strike, had Koreans playing it, and from something like, I think it was 2005 onwards, they were competitive, the top 2 teams with the best teams in the world. Like, they were in the final of the major stuff, and Counter-Strike was a game dominated by Europeans, and then the second best region was NA after that. And the point is, they didn't have anywhere close to the population that would ever justify this actually being like you had enough players in the funnel and you get out the end the quality players. It was just the idea that they practiced, as you'd expect, the crazy Korean work ethic. And so one of the things they had to do was, even among people who played Counter-Strike in Korea, they actually couldn't practice against the whole Korean population because most of them used like a rip-off non-Steam version. So to practice, they could only play people who were trying to be pro in Korea, tiny fraction of them. And that was just like a tiny group, like 1 and 2 teams, maybe a couple of amateur teams. So what they used to do instead was go into the empty server and just, instead of like, listen, an in-game leader in Counter-Strike might go into a server to find like a flashbang or something or work on something. They would just all as a team go in and they would do it like it was synchronized swimming. They would just all learn the exact, in fact, it was a bit like running routes as like a wide receiver or something. They would practice like every game. I always run exactly this route on this timing, and then someone throws the flashbangs. And basically they actually, no joke, were tactically one of like the better teams in the world. And that mixture of work ethic, this crazy like approach that they took to the game, like sort of made up some of the gap, as it were. And then the last thing they did, and this is why I've always said this is the killer for me, that you can't do this because of the LCS circuit. So everyone knows before Worlds you go to a boot camp, and what's the story? You spend the first 2 or 3 weeks figuring out how is the game actually played. Koreans, because it was an open circuit in Counter-Strike, when the big tournaments would be in Europe, like 2 or 3 tournaments in a row, they would just come 2 weeks before, go to the best LAN cafe in Sweden, sit there, not only scrim on super low ping, but they would basically get scrims against all the European teams. And so basically, I've always thought in League of Legends, there's another solution. What if there was enough time between all the splits? After every split, you go to a Korean boot camp. Or maybe in the modern day, by the way, the obvious example in the modern day would be, why not just at least go to LEC for a week or something, you know? As in go and practice the Europeans when they've got their off. Like, there's a lot of things haven't been explored because unfortunately people do that thing where they just take the like what Riot has made for the game and they can't think outside that box. They think like my idea has to be self-contained inside here. Yeah. A lot of the actual ideas that could fix some of this stuff existed decades ago, boys.
I mean, that story reminds me, like, one of the best NA teams that did well internationally was 2016 CLG at MSI. Yep. And why was that? Because they were playing their own style. They brought the mage support meta into that tournament. Another example, not NA, but Europe before Europe became better internationally, was Misfits in 2017. It was Ardent meta, but they brought in their own flavor with engage support and putting Ardent in mid lane or in jungle with Ivern. So yeah, it's a lot more about strategy. And now you see that with like the LEC teams, it's nothing to do with ping or anything. It's like they've just developed their strategy and macro.
Or FPX. I mean, nobody played like FPX at the time. They had a completely different style in 2019 when they won the World Championship.
Because you know that Misfits team that almost beat SKT but didn't. 3 of them play in NA now, so that's it. Played. Al-Fari just watches people play, but yeah, whatever.
That is still so wild to me that
that reminds me, I've got a joke because listen, I know not everyone follows my Twitter. Let's be real, everyone follows my Twitter, but let's pretend you don't all see everything because listen, there's a lot of quality programming on there. I have 24-hour programming going at this point in time. I had a banger, right, where because everyone was trying to engage Al-Fari to draw out more spicy tweets because everyone knows what a straight fire first one he did. When he was saying something, Dom replied or something like, yeah, but because he said like some tweet where it was like he looked like he had a gun to his head, like, you know, I wish I could be playing, but I hope Jenkins has my full support or whatever. It's like, yeah, whatever, mate. Okay. When he did that, right, Dom said something like, oh, you're not thinking about any like Chipotle or something this week. So I just said, I'd do a DoorDash if I was him. Don't know about takeout though. And here's what's fire, Monty. The DoorDash account actually liked that in like 1 second flat or something. So it's like, you know what? Whoever's in the marketing department, there you go. Co-signing Thorin bangers. That's right. I see.
DoorDash sponsor Summoning Insight. There you go. We'll do your DoorDash of the week segment for which player we think should get kicked from their team or should leave voluntarily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to order something exotic, who should they bring over from Europe or Korea?
So there you go. Feeling like Korean food
That
this
was
week.
like 5 seconds. That was already a better fucking activation than like half the LCS. Come on, man.
EG is interested in ordering one chovy, but he didn't want to come. He didn't want to come.
Didn't want to leave evil.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about EG's LCS performance because it's been a wild couple of weeks for EG. There have been some really crazy games you guys have participated in. You lost a very strange game in week number 1. You won a very strange game in week number 2. These late game scenarios. There's been a lot of talk about Jiizuke's pro view because that guy is fucking hilarious. Just his BM is very, very entertaining. I love Jiizuke as a player and a personality. Now, would I want him on my team? Maybe not. But do I enjoy the fact that he plays like a crazy person and I get to watch it? Yes, I absolutely do. Is a little bit coin flippy at times. But also, I think Jiizuke offers, speaking of styles, like a very unique style to a roster. He's always going to be some crazy split push threat. He's always going to play differently than you expect him to play. He has huge balls and no fear. You opted out of the Jiizuke experience last year. But you come back this year and you're all in on Jiizuke. So let's start with what was the change there for you guys in terms of the offseason planning and why you wanted to bring him back after kind of benching him in last year.
I mean, a person like Jiizuke, when we created the roster, we bring in impact and then having a deathly or like a strong bot lane in general. We want someone with firepower, and we thought Jiizuke, in terms of like laning and what he can bring, is still one of the top players in the LCS. Obviously, he has a different way of playing the game than other mid laners. He's more akin to players like Bwipo or Hylissang, where if he like
randomly ints.
Well, because of his playstyle, right? Fans like this is like a really important point that not a lot of people talk about. Like, because of his playstyle, fans tend to magnify his misplays because his misplays are more recognizable. Like his action sequences are really recognizable. And people don't give that same criticism to players who make crucial mistakes in other aspects of the game, like in action sequences where like it's about micro laning that affect like who gets the first crab. We saw that like with Fudge and Blabber in one of the games at MSI, or like when it comes to map movement, or like recalling at the wrong time, which affects the team's tempo.
Well, that's because plebs can't understand what's going on.
Yeah, and I don't blame fans for this, right? They don't have the necessary knowledge about the game from these subtle perspectives that coaches and players and analysts do. But yeah, like players like Hylissang, Bwipo, Jiizuke, and even Huni get way more flack than they deserve compared to other players because their action sequences are just more recognizable. And then the other thing is that these players also have like their insane moments where like, holy shit, this guy just won us the game. And like on Saturday versus TL when Jiizuke was on Akali, we were like 3 or 4k gold behind, and he just makes this crazy play around the fourth dragon spawn, which got us right back in the game, and then he soul kills Jensen in the side lane. So one of the reasons why we wanted to continue with Jiizuke, because we thought with bringing in someone with a coach like Peter Dunn, who has a lot of experience working with players like this, like he worked with Humanoid previously, and Humanoid sort of has the same profile as Jiizuke does as a player. We thought that we think that Peter is able to help Jiizuke identify those moments better and be able to risk assess at a much better level than what he did last season. We also thought that like the team last year didn't jive really well with Jiizuke as the team this year does. Like this year, a lot of our players are just down to get down and dirty, and that's what we've seen in the past 2 weeks on the LCS team.
I think part of it, though, in that Team Liquid win, and I want to get your opinion as well as an analyst, is that both Akali and Xin Zhao are quietly, well, Akali is very loudly broken. Xin Zhao is very quietly. I would say Xin Zhao is slipping under the radar for a lot of people because the conversation is dominated by Gwen or Akali, maybe Lulu to a certain degree, but nobody ever talks about Xin Zhao. But here's some stats for you guys. Akali and Xin Zhao are the highest win rate champions that have been played for more than 20 games across all major regions. That's LPL, LCK, LEC, and LCS. Akali is currently at a 76% win rate at 25-8, and Xin Zhao is at a 71% win rate at 17-7. You had both of them in the Team Liquid game. So what are your thoughts on these champions right now? Because obviously Gwen is also extremely strong, but to put this in perspective, Gwen has been played 30 times and is 15-15 at 50%. So part of that has been, obviously we can't completely separate it from the players, but I will say that in my experience in League of Legends, to have a champion that has been played 33 times and be 25-8 across all major regions like Akali is very rare. Very rare.
Yeah. It reminds me of like Callista when she was at her peak, and even Kassadin.
Maybe, yeah, Cass is the classic one, of course, yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
TF back in the day.
Rise when he's been broken in the past, maybe.
Yeah. I think a part of it is like with Akali, she raised she raised in priority very quickly
Yes.
in like the past 4 days. Like I think the reason we picked her up is because we saw her in one of like the LPL games or Korean LCK games. I can't remember which exactly, and we thought, oh, we can try her out as like a counter in these situations where she can't be punished. And then in our first game, we picked Akali. Can't remember when we picked her. I think we picked her. Oh, we picked her 2-3. We were blue side, so we picked her 2-3. Like, oh, this went really well. Impact played it, and he popped off on it. And then the next day, we're like, we should pick her again, and we should place higher priority on her. And then we picked it on 1-2 on red side. And then ultimately, 100 Thieves banded against us yesterday. And then we saw in other regions, like in LEC, she was picked first on like 4-5, and then the next day she was picked on like the later rotations, the middle rotation, and then on the third day, everyone was just first picking Kali until like the 4th or 5th game it got banned by the last teams. And I think it's very interesting. I think she is really, really strong because her kit can't really be punished because of like her laning phase. You can get a lot of priority and then try to get gold leads through like playing through side and like abusing enemy jungler because Akali doesn't have prio very early on. But because of how her kit scales with levels, like her past level 9, her E with one mythic item just does way too much damage. If you see the ratios on that ability, the base damage is super high. It's like 400 at max level, and the AP ratio is I think 120.
Yeah,
and
it's
the AD
1.2,
ratio,
I believe.
Yeah, and the AD ratio is also really high. So that basic ability basically hits like a truck, like an ultimate ability. And then you also have her ultimate, and then she's able to unlike Gwen, she's able to traverse terrain much more easier in fights, while also be a lot more safer because she has the shroud, she has a lot of dashes.
It's hard to gank her even if she doesn't have flash, because the amount of ground she can cover between the shroud and the dash basically gets her back to mid turret.
Yeah, and then I think the other point is that teams haven't thought about how to counter Akali if she's picked early yet, but we saw some instances where she can be countered. For example, in the TSM versus, were they playing Immortals? I can't remember who they were playing. I think they were
Let me
playing
look
a
it up
team
for
yesterday.
you.
Yeah, but they picked LeBlanc against Akali.
Oh, CLG.
It was CLG.
Yeah, CLG, and obviously Pobelter didn't have a great performance on Akali, but LeBlanc can be good into Akali because the chain can reveal her, and LeBlanc is really good at marking Akali in flanks, because we saw in one of those instances around Baron, LeBlanc was waiting, marking Akali in the flank, waiting for her to approach the Akali flank, and then just one shot her immediately, because LeBlanc just can do that against Akali. So I think you'll see in the next few weeks probably Akali being banned, but also maybe sometimes teams leaving it open and being able to, if it's picked early, it going badly for that team, because teams are gonna pick champions who do well in countering her. I think also in the C9 game there was an Akali, and Vulcan picked Galio, and Galio is really good at locking up Akali in fights because of like the AoE taunt, and once you taunt her, she's gonna auto attack you. Then you can see her, and then he can knock her up, and then everyone can just focusing on the Akali. So I think you'll see a lot more of ways for teams to counter Akali. But because of her like sudden rise, teams kind of forgot how to counter Akali, or kind of like didn't think too much about it during draft. But I think we'll see that change going forward.
I have a quick question though, because you said there it was like a very rapid rise, as you said, even when it came in a pro plate, so you can see it going through the ban, the pick priority rather. Does this just mean, because here's the problem, when I see a scenario like that where everyone's like, haha, just ban this champion because they see like, oh, it's winning every game, a fan, right? I often think in that scenario, because as often it can be the case, obviously the teams are scrimming, and there's been 2 weeks now. It's not like no one's ever tried it, but that usually means that in scrims, you were having a good enough time or wasn't high enough priority for you. You're like, well, we'll find a way to deal with it. Was it really just not played in scrims? Did it come completely out of nowhere? Did people think they had counters that they didn't when you get on stage, when it's harder to execute, blah blah blah?
Yeah, I mean in scrims, like Akali was usually picked on the last rotations, if she was ever picked, but she didn't have an increased presence in scrims, and I watched scrims in all 3 levels, so both from our team and enemy teams, like I didn't see like high priority in Akali, and maybe a part of it is also because in scrims games can go by a lot quicker, and Akali doesn't really spike until like level 9, so maybe that's a part of it,
Right.
because on stage games go a bit longer, so
Yes.
she's able to reach those points. There's a lot less chaos happening on the map, so that's probably also a part of it. But yeah, that's probably why I would say that happened.
Worth noting too that a couple of these losses were CLG versus TSM with Akali.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
also,
the bad teams.
yeah, and then Dignitas versus Cloud9. And I mean, Dignitas is a middle of the pack team, but Cloud9 certainly looked significantly better this week after they actually had some practice on this patch. Also, Sword Art did play the Tahm Kench, which is always helpful into certain assassin matchups as well. So I think teams, like you say, will adapt. And perhaps we're just, it's funny how you see these cycles in the meta develop, because it's not like this is the first time Akali has been strong, but forgetting how to counter champions or pick against it does take some time for those players to kind of get back on the horse on those champions, and then remember how to play in team fights against those champions, as well as the timings of map pressure that they exert. So yeah, it does take some time for teams to adjust back to what they already know.
Ultimately, I think she's still going to be a strong champion, but her win rate will remain at that like 75+%, or whatever it was. Like it's going to go back down to like maybe 60, if and that's like at the higher end. Rarely do you see, like, I don't think I assume she's not that broken to remain at that level.
Do you have any thoughts on any of the other major picks that we've seen right now? Like I mentioned, Xin Zhao, which is another champion that kind of came out of nowhere. Lulu has risen hugely in priority. We're actually seeing a return to Juggernaut style compositions, across the world, which I always enjoyed. So I'm cool with it.
Xin Zhao, they buffed him like a few patches ago, and I think he's seen play recently because on point 10, I believe, or point 11, they increased spawn timers for jungle camps by like 15 seconds. And so that allows ganking junglers like Xin Zhao and what were the other champions? Xin Zhao, Lee Sin, which is also being played in jungle recently, and Volibear. They have, because of the increased jungle timers, they can clear, and then they have more time to affect lanes with ganks. So that's one part. The other part is I think his kit is really, really strong right now, because there's just so much tankiness, and the reach with, if you land your spear, it increases your dash range. And then he goes really well with the enchanter mages that you mentioned, like Lulu and Karma. If they buff a champion like him up, he can cause a lot of like mayhem in fights and skirmishes. So that's the main reason why I think he's in a good spot right now. In terms of win rate, I think maybe he's in the same spot as Akali. Like, people don't know what to play into it. If it's like picked early, it's kind of like a shock thing. So maybe we see more teams experimenting more with like what to pick into it. Like we saw Blabber pick Olaf into it versus Dignitas, I think. So we might see a bit of that same effect with Xin Zhao. And in terms of like Lulu and Karma, Shirelia's is a big part of why they're really good. They buffed that item that even when you enchant or protect an ally, It gives that ally movement speed, both you and the ally movement speed. And then also a part of it, but I don't think it's a huge part, on point 11, Hex Flash was disabled globally.
Yep.
So there's less punishment to those champions to be able to reach them with the engage supports.
So for some of the other teams, let's go through some of the other teams in LCS, because it started out pretty crazy, I think, last week with some of the results as teams were figuring out the meta. Yeah, you saw a lot of long games, including the EG game that you guys ended up losing at the last possible second. What is the take on the new meta, and which teams you think are very threatening right now? 100 Thieves has obviously come out to a pretty early, I think, lead in terms of this split with Abadage. They've looked extremely good. Abadage didn't even die this past weekend on 100 Thieves after switching from his like triple karma performance in week number 1. But 100 Thieves looks like they may be a contender for the title right now.
Yeah. So in terms of the meta, I really love the meta right now because the champions that are in the meta are a lot of fun. There's also a lot of diversity. You can play enchanters, you can play assassins, you can play bruisers, you can play different sorts of ADCs, from Ezreal to Senna to Varus, Kai'Sa, Tristana. There's just a lot of options, and mages aren't OP, but they can be played. We saw Abadage play the Orianna. We saw some Victor in the LEC. We saw some Syndra, Zoe. So I really like the meta right now because it feels like there's a lot of diversity. Maybe that settles in a few weeks and we go to like 3-4 champions per role. But right now I really like it. And maybe a big part of it is because mages are not OP right now. So I hope Riot doesn't overtune them in the future, because I feel like we've had enough mages like Syndra, Orianna, and Azir and Corki for like the last 2-3 years. I'm really happy if we stay in this meta for like at least till the end of the season. In terms of which teams are doing really well, because mages are weaker, obviously teams that have really good mage players like Jensen and PoE, those teams are going to be a bit weaker, and teams that are really good with like these these non-mage players, like teams that have Perks, who's really good on LeBlanc and Akali and Lee Sin and assassins, and Abadage, who's really known for his Akali and his Sylas. These teams are gonna
and Jiizuke, EG,
and Jiizuke and EG. Like those players are gonna enjoy this meta a lot more and thrive in it a lot more. And yeah, like you said, 100 Thieves is looking really, really good. They have strong lanes in every role. And then they have a jungler who is really good at skirmishing and playing for those lanes. And that's part of like why they're doing really well right now.
But if you just give Rioma time.
Well, it wasn't about that.
He could have the fucking time stone from Avengers. Like, it wouldn't help him, mate.
It wasn't about that. It was about the fact that they needed to import a mid laner and they couldn't do it, because I remember Papa Smithy like texting me like a couple days after playoffs ended, being like, someday got his green card, and I was like, nice. But the timing was absolutely insane. By the way, it was like LCS playoffs end, and then Sunday instantly got his green card. Going back to the green card conversation you have earlier, you have no idea when it's going to come in. So the timing was absolutely perfect. So they maximized the amount of like time between the end of spring and beginning of summer in order to, get Abadage, bring him over to LA, develop team synergy, like scrim, get him all settled. It really could not have worked out better for 100 Thieves.
By the way,
They're very fortunate.
That's one of the reasons why they do actually, in my opinion, need to like make a hard decision one way or the other on like the import rule, because of the whole like residency thing. Because if you're saying like that you can't even know when you get it, how the fuck can I be the GM of a team then? Like, what if I was building a team like an Exodia team like that, but then it just turns out the one Exodia guy that everyone else, flips in 3 months. My guy just takes a year and a half. Well, then you're not going to be able to have a job anymore. Like, you don't just get 10 years as a GM, do you? Like, that's ridiculous.
Well, to be fair, no one's getting a green card in 3 months. It will take multiple years. And like at the very least,
when you apply, in terms of like when it'll come, etc., like you get accepted. If you get declined 4 times in a row, and this guy gets once,
yeah.
So Papa Smithy didn't know. Yeah, Papa Smithy didn't know like when he's going to be able to import that mid laner. And that like creates like a lot of backlash because they're like, why are they starting Rio?
Yes.
Like,
Here's another angle that I'd fuck you. Imagine you go, oh, he's never getting the bloody green card. You sell him, and then that team, they instantly get one. Like, and then you know what I mean? The same thing. Like, there's no way to run a sport. Like, you can't. You gotta have some of these things in the future that you know when things are going to happen, so you can plan accordingly.
Well, they used to have that, Thorin. They used to have that where it was like you play X number of splits in LCS
or something. Yeah.
But then they changed it to the green card process, which also, by the way, the longer this game goes on, the differences in presidential administrations also change the speed at which you get a green card, because it affects, immigration policy based on who is in control of the U.S. government affects that. So, I personally don't particularly like that aspect of it either, but it does make it very difficult for GMs to do their job. And I understand the perception that Riot has, which is that they want people to be committed to LCS, and having a green card, I think, does, I wouldn't say dramatically, but does increase a player's likelihood to stick around in the United States, especially Korean players, because you know what that means, guys? They don't have to do Korean military service. So it's really important to the Korean players to have that green card. So it does create, I think, more incentive, particularly for players of Korean origin who have not done their military service yet, to stay and play in LCS for the long haul. So I get that motivation, because you don't want your star players just to bounce or start changing regions. But it does introduce a high level of uncertainty into the equation for sure. So as we wrap up here, Empyre, are there any other teams that have impressed you in the LCS? Because in general, like, I think, well, actually, let's ask this question. What were your thoughts on C9 and their performance at MSI? Because it was bizarre in the way that they both lost to the worst teams, but also beat the best teams, which I think I would be more encouraged by that. Like, fans will get mad because they lost to Pentanet. I think that losing to Pentanet, but beating top LCK and LPL teams is a better result than just beating Pentanet every time they play and then losing all your games to the top regions.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care too much about like best of one results. So it's kind of sad we didn't get to see C9 in like series versus these teams, especially the top teams. From the outside, and like some of the things they've said in interviews, it seems like going into it, they weren't unsure of the meta. They came out with like a Kindred Lulu comp to begin with, which funny enough is like a strong composition now, at least in the West. And that didn't work out. And then they tried the Rumble, that didn't work out. Then they went back to the Udyr, that worked. Perks wasn't doing so hot, or wasn't able to affect the map when he was playing mages than when he was playing stuff like Tristana or Silas and Zoe. It felt like they were a bit all over the place going into the tournament and even towards the end of it. So it's really hard to pinpoint. I feel like C9, when they understand the meta and they know how they want to play out the early game, are just a really, really strong opponent. And that's why they were able to take off games off the best teams. But when they kind of mess up their read on the draft, or when they mess up their knowledge of how to play the early game, we end up in those situations where they like are like 4v4ing at the first scuttle crab spawn, and then the game just collapses entirely from that. So yeah, C9 is a really weird team, especially in best of ones. But in series, I would always put my money on them. At least like in NA. Internationally, we don't know 100% yet. But I feel like they're more of a best of 5 team than a best of 1 team.
What do you think about the transition from spring to summer? Because I think the level of play in LCS was pretty tragic as a whole in the spring, but roster moves like Abadage, you guys making a roster move, which I consider to be very helpful for you in terms of getting some new blood in the team and ending the Deftly experiment, as it were. Do you feel like this is going to be a better split overall for LCS with a higher level of competition?
I think the macro will still be bad.
Well, why is that? Why is that?
I don't know, man. Or else we would be winning LCS. I'm not the coach, so I'm not 100% sure. But from what I've seen so far, I think the the NA macro is still bad compared to when I'm watching like China or LEC, at least the top teams in LEC.
This is what confuses me, though.
Ask you a weird question. I've got a devil's advocate angle for that. Okay, this is what it is. Okay, basically, it's the same concept as in solo queue, right? Which is that when one of the reasons, in my opinion, people always cry about being in elo hell is because normally they're on Reddit. They're people who are fans of esports, right? So what they do is they watch professionals play. They code in their brain this is how the game's played, and then they go and play bronze players, and that doesn't work. Like against bronze players, like you go in as the jungler, no one's following you up in that scenario. Like you try to do like a fucking like wait for me, guys. I'm just farming this off. They're just gonna fight without you. Know what I mean? Like you actually have to play logically worse to play at a low level. So is there something similar in this regard? Like if someone tried like a lot of crazy side laning or some sort of like clever approach, would it just like actually potentially not be as good against whatever NA does?
Yeah, so kind of like I won't go into the specifics of it, but like we had a discussion recently where like a player is saying, but if they do this, they're trolling because they don't know if I am going to be in that spot. But then, our coach said it's NA. They are going to come to this objective because that's what NA does. They just group. So if you're not there, our team gets screwed. So it's weird. Like I don't understand it completely yet.
Actually, the reason, by the way, why I love people like LS, and I think we need them in the scene, because the concepts they try to bring over from like Magic the Gathering and stuff, this is exactly what you need. Like you can have the weakest color can be a counter to one of the best colors. Now, it doesn't make that the best color, but it means that against that particular attack, they will actually win. The same thing, I'll give you a very quick tangent, has basically happened at the moment in Counter-Strike. There's a young player who came up who plays for a team called Virtus Pro, this CIS team called Yakinda, right? And basically one of the things he's been doing is he's just exploiting all these gaps in the game that pro players don't take these particular fights because in theory they're not good. Like if you take a very aggressive fight, I'll make it very vague here, in this particular way, normally if you do that, like they use flashbangs against you or they just like would already kill you if you did that. But the idea is if the other person just thinks already, well, he's not going to try it, therefore I'm not going to do what the counter to that would be. That actually creates like an opening of an unknown area on the map that you can exploit, but you can't exploit it forever, obviously. Like if people eventually adapt, that will be countered. But it means there's a brief period where even playing worse can make you win against the top one. So I think it also goes in reverse because basically that was similar to the story. I've taken all the stories of the coaches I know who come from Europe and go to NA, the star players who were the mid laners and solo laners. Obviously they're the ones I'm like, why aren't you just in the side lane? And they just tell me like, you would just lose way more games, mate. Like it just doesn't make like, cause everyone, including some of my teammates, but all of the other team won't play the correct way against that. You know, the old classic Idra thing of like, you only won because you played incorrectly against my correct play. It's like, brother, that doesn't, I know what you mean, but that doesn't work. Like you have to win the game at the end of the day.
Part of it is a mental game.
Yeah, essentially, I sort of get the premise of that. It makes sense. It won't to a fan because they think it's like an absolute thing. And you know, however RNG or fucking damn one plays is how you're supposed to play. But like, not necessarily. They play against their opponents. You play against yours. Whatever. It was a great point. So you didn't have anything to say, Monty. Move on.
I mean, I just find it ridiculous that the macro can be viewed so that's the issue that you can't solve, because if ping was the issue, then surely you would focus on the macro game as the method to improve first and foremost, because you can do that through analyzing other teams and not even playing the game.
Well, think of it this way: like we've also imported coaches from other regions, players from other regions. Why haven't they been able to translate the knowledge they've had from previous regions?
Yeah, why is that?
I don't know. Or else I would have the answer.
It is a mystery.
To me, this is the greatest mystery about North American League of Legends is like why you can't take macro concepts and at least be good at that. Because in theory, it shouldn't matter the solo queue experience.
Here's the real problem, Monty, and this is what, sadly, you know, like we wish that bit will never happen. The real thing that would make it interesting to me would be take a team. So example, an obvious example would be like if you went back like, I'm going to say like a year, 2 years, and you could take like the Origen team with Alfari and Nukeduck, and you just brought them to LCS, and they just come the entire team, and you pop them in. Do they dominate because they actually know all these concepts, or do they actually flounder and be a mid-table team because it wouldn't work? The problem is you'd really need to like A/B test like that. Like, it can't just be an individual player. I want to see an actual team that I know can do it. I've seen them do it all the time, and then they come into LCS. I'd love to see how they do, but obviously we don't have an open circuit, so we'll never see that. You can forget that.
We're not allowed to have that. We're not allowed to have that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Maybe like a part of it is like the import coaches or the import players come in, and instead of like just elevating the region, it's more of like a
they come down to their level.
Right, not all the way, but like more halfway.
Okay. Right.
So maybe it's better to look at it from that way. Like, it's just because you bring a part doesn't mean you're gonna elevate to that level, but you're gonna elevate it slightly.
I mean, put it this way, Monty. If there was any way that they could convince him, like, you think that Jiizuke was just like, yeah, just team fight on a 0 all the time. Why not? Yeah, I'm cool with that. Yeah, I'm down, homie. I'm down. He would want to be inside it all day long. He tries to go there like level 4 or something. Not really, but you get the joke.
I love that about him, though. That's what I find. That's what I find so entertaining.
I think it's the shit.
I mean, you guys say that LCS should be more like WWE, and Jiizuke definitely fills the part of that.
I know, which, by the way, has been vastly underutilized by you guys in terms of your marketing and content. Like, he is so entertaining, and yet why did I have to watch that one clip of him with a flamethrower all of last year? Why couldn't you have done more stuff? Like, give me more Jiizuke content.
A skit where he's Wario and he's just fucking up the game for everyone. He's just making all crazy shit happening and stuff. He's got the haircut already.
I want to see.
It was COVID restrictions, but yeah,
right,
we should do more. We should do more content.
I just want to see. I want to see a montage of like all the shit that he types to people in solo queue games that he's in.
Oh, here's another one. Here's another free idea for you. So, you know, everyone loves at the moment when that like Dave Portnoy does all those like pizza reviews or whatever, right? Since you all know that like Italians are like pizza supremacists because they like the like perfect thin crust with like, you know, the traditional tomatoes and the sauce is made with your grandma's recipe. All you have to do is this: take Jiizuke to like 6 different pizza chains in America, because obviously he's going to be like, what the fuck is that? Like, and he's going to taste the pizza, by the way. By the way, I love this. I'm trash from the Northeast. I fucking hate normal Italian pizza. I love this trash. I like it when they put all the sugar in the sauce. Like, oh, tastes lovely now. And when it's like not crispy, it's all like, you know, fucking soggy. But obviously, I'm high as fuck half the time. But it is fucking amazing. Like, he would consider it like a war crime though. So I think it'd be amazing content. Yeah, he'd be sick. Of course. And then just give Sven Skaren some of it afterwards or something, you know, whatever. He's got to do something with the pizza. He's got enough gains. He can handle it.
He can take it. All right. Well, there you go. Those are some ideas for you for content. I know that's your primary job and interest there, Empyre.
Yep. Some freebies.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. We do have to take a quick break, and we're going to talk about LEC with Deficio, who has generously graced us with his presence on this show. Thank you for generously gracing us with yours, Empyre. It's been fun to talk about league analytics. All right. We'll be back in just a few minutes. We're back to talk about LEC with my old friend, Martin Deficio. I had to figure out a new way to invite him onto the show by pressuring him through other people at Misfits, because he's actually legit terrible at responding to any messages that I send him. So I have a new strategy now.
Yeah, I know Thorin was going to say this.
Okay. All right. It feels like a fucking Tinder, mate. You've matched, but you're never replying. You follow, and there's no fucking report. What's going on?
It's been a great show, everyone. Thank you for watching. See you next week.
Well, we got him. He eventually agreed to do it.
Twitter DMs are bad. Twitter DMs are bad.
Okay.
So, yeah, thank you very much for coming on the show, Martin. It's always lovely to chat with you. I miss our lunch dates in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, me too. But I guess we can soon go back to Los Angeles. Is it open now for European travel?
The U.S. is open, and actually, here's a fun fact. Tomorrow, Los Angeles and California drop all social distancing and mask requirements, and everything is perfectly open. So
we just dropped the mask part today as well.
Yeah, so
it's only public transport, I think. Everything else, you're good to go.
And of course, over the weekend, Misfits dropped the mask of being shit and no one caring, and all of a sudden we're winning against everyone. So
which is very curious to me, because I know people may not know this, Deficio, but your name is actually Latin for "I fail." which has been accurate for your GMing.
All I'm going to say is this, Deficio. If you know anything about the field of like magic and alchemy, it's considered very, very important the name of something because it can impart attributes. So, for example, I'm called Thorin Oakenshield. You know, it's a character that was very brave, but he was a little bit, you know, sometimes he got like drawn away by the money, but at the same time, he's no one you want in a battle fighting for your leader of men, and so you know. Picking like I fail as like a Latin fucking motto feels like, listen, it's like that scene in Blade where he just goes, some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill. So that's, you know, you set yourself up for hard one there, mate. You know,
I'll take it.
Okay.
Some highs, some lows as a GM. I think it's fair to add in there. Trying to imitate the passing career.
If I've learned anything from my coaching career, Martin, it's that people only remember the failure and they never actually remember when you were doing well. So
I think that's part of it. I'm also very happy to take it on me so other people don't get flamed. Like I got kind of used to that when I was a commentator in the start, and like it really doesn't impact me. I don't really read Reddit too much. I don't read Twitter too much. So I'm fine with that. You know, I think there has definitely been, again, highs and lows, but a lot of learnings, just to get the PR part in there, that I can now use here in Misfits, which I'm actually very happy with. So in the end, it's going in a positive direction now.
You got out of the whole Origen Astralis situation, trying to just like slash your pay there, you know, a bunch of weirdness. You know what I loved about that is I remember when you guys when you joined Astralis, and I was asking like, are you going to use the Astralis name initially? And you were like, no, we're buying the Origen brand. And then they just went back to Astralis. They spent all that money paying Expecke for it and then just let it go in the end, which I think they should have just used Astralis the whole time. I didn't really understand what the value of the Origen brand was in particular, especially when the Counter-Strike team was doing so well.
Well, I mean, initially it was because Astralis was such a mainstream name already in Denmark, and it was very specifically just around Counter-Strike. So when the opportunity was there to bring in the Origen brand, there was a lot of upside to it, but obviously there was also a lot of extra work and a lot of risk using the brand. But I think the upside was high enough for it actually to be a good decision initially. But then executing on it was just very difficult, especially when we weren't winning in summer splits, because we know how big, you know, winning is when it comes to kind of building a brand or rebuilding a brand. Because obviously, if you take the Origen Twitter account as an example, because we were just talking about this before we went live, like it had 750K followers coming in, but these were pretty much all followers from 2015, 16 times. And obviously then the brand had really kind of disappeared. So no new followers really, other than that one EU Masters with Forgiven and Froggen, where they probably got some. So in some ways, you still had to kind of like rebuild and restart the brand to get in new fans, which was really successful in the first split when we had the finals run. But then obviously when we failed to make Worlds in summer, it kind of became really, really hard to keep pushing the brand, also because people thought we played really boring, which was another, I guess, problem in that summer split. But yeah, I had a lot of things that could have been done better, obviously, with the Origen brand, but also I think now going back to Astralis has, you know, some upside for sure, but I don't actually really know the reason behind the change. It was, you know, kind of decided after I'd already left.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about Misfits, because this team kind of, you guys, I would say you guys were robbed of quite a few games in the spring, and I think you were probably better than your record showed. And then you come out very strong this first week of LEC. You guys go 3-0, but it wasn't just the fact that you guys went 3-0. What was so impressive to me was that you were playing a really clean macro game. And even though they were showing on the broadcast, so you guys were kind of down in gold in the early games, what I thought was so great was that Razork and the rest of your lanes were playing very well around jungle pressure and knowing when you guys could invade and when you had macro advantages. You looked a lot more like Rogue, frankly, than I expected. but you played some really good, proper League of Legends. And I'm very curious how this happened between spring and summer, because one of the biggest differentiators between elite teams at a global level right now is knowing how to play around jungle camp timers and when to execute invades. And you guys were doing that very, very well, especially in the Vitality game.
So if we look at spring, the second half obviously was very good, and we started playing much more like this style. But there were issues if the team fell far behind in kind of being able to find openings to get back in the game. I think it got better in that second half as well, and it became much more kind of build up of who's making what calls, who's leading certain things, and then also just I think naturally Hirid and Vitio as two rookies of the LEC, the more weeks they got to play, the more they were able to also actually perform better and fit into the team communication-wise, which is such a key part of what you're actually mentioning now. So I think the whole plan between spring and summer, within a week of spring ending, the entire staff sat down, and it was very quickly decided we weren't going to make roster changes because we didn't have to. We already had a core of 5 starters who were actually meshing really well together and who were finding really good synergy towards that second half.
You were taking games against top teams. You beat Mad Lions in your last week of play in spring.
I mean, we were 2-0 versus Mad Lions. Then we were 0-2 versus SK and Vitality, which is obviously why we didn't make playoffs and lost that last game crucially as well. But I think like keeping the lineup together and then making the whole preseason, we started pretty early, and it was just built around like getting to practice super quickly, but also the staff, especially also with our performance coach or sports psychologist, whatever we want to call him, Owen, who's with the guys full time. There's a lot of focus on like team activities and actually things like outside of the game to build up even more synergy, which leads to much better reviews and dealing with problems.
What are these exercises? Can you give us some examples? It's very vague.
I mean, it can literally be anything from do you guys know that game with the 4 chairs and you sit there and you have to lean back and it's a trust exercise?
Yes, trust fall type thing.
Yeah, exactly. And you do this all the way around, and like it's fun, and it gets people talking to each other, and it builds like personalities and characters between them, and it's something that they start talking to each other as friends and not just as teammates.
In America, we have these. I don't know if you have them in Europe. These things called high ropes courses. Like, are you familiar with these?
We actually did something like that in Origin, I think, where they were climbing up like super high and they had to like hold on to each other.
And like rope bridges, and like that you have to like do teamwork or like exercises that are like 30 feet in the air, and you're stuck onto like a carabiner and a rope. Those are very popular for like team building in America.
Like middle management type focus.
Yes.
I mean, it's so doing parts of that while also, of course, like doing things where people get much more familiar and they trust each other much more with negative feedback and understanding that you can actually have a tough conversation about something that's going wrong without you hating the person. And you can take it much more openly if you have a much closer relationship. And that's a big part of, also when you keep a lineup together, you can do more things. You can find out what the different characters and personalities really resonate with. You reach a point where their relationship with the staff and themselves is really, really good. And now going into practice, you can have a horrible day. Everything can go wrong. You lose 0-5 to Schalke. It happened, like leading into to the LEC beginning. And then people can be mad, but then they can actually apologize to each other, talk about what do we do different for tomorrow, and then it's fixed, and you are now back. Instead of it just snowballing into more negative, and then somebody doesn't want to play, and everything just goes horribly wrong. So it's different things like this. I'm obviously making slightly vague because
of course
I can't go through every single day and so on. But it's a mix of that plus more in-game practice. And also I think we found a really good setup coaching wise at the moment, where
you replaced your coach between spring and summer. You elevated Candy Floss to head coach.
Yeah, so we had Enatron in spring as the head coach title, which what the head coach title was supposed to look like coming into spring kind of changed during the spring split because of the people we had, where it became less of this like classic football head coach who's supposed to be the man manager and the leader, and he's supposed to be the smartest guy in the team, and he's like the big boss who can control the players and he can do everything. It became much more effective for us to actually divide that up into multiple people's responsibilities, which ended up not being obviously also what Enetron was looking for when he joined. So it was a pretty quick conversation between him and us saying we are going in a different direction than what he wanted, and he wanted to explore his options, which was fine. So Alex Candyfloss got promoted up, and his main focus together with Sani, who was our academy coach before, is a lot of just the in-game things. And then we have Owen, our sports psychologist. We have Hachi, who is the sports director, who's a fantastic guy when it comes to managing people, players, taking care of a lot of the things happening outside of the game and communication things, potential conflicts, issues. And it gets really well divided between that 4-man group, which makes it much easier to, have very clear plans for who's doing what. And this is the first time I've had this. It used to be very few people having to try and do a lot of things and be spread very thin and maybe not being as good at dealing with conflicts as they are dealing with in-game drafting or whatever, because it's very hard to find that in esports. I don't even know if it exists. Now we have 2 people doing very specific in-game things, 2 people doing outside of game things, and they know their roles, they know what they're doing, and the players know who's doing what, so they know who to go to for different things. And that actually has created a really strong foundation around the 5 starters specifically that I'm very happy with at the moment.
So what are the official titles of these people that you've given them now as you've kind of broken up these roles? Do you have names for what they do?
I think for Riot reasons, you have to call them head coach and strategic coach, I thought.
Yeah, exactly. So it's head coach, strategic coach. Head coach is Candyfloss, who used to be with Mouse Sports and leader before. Then Sani is the strategic coach / secondary coach in the Riot system. So they are a duo doing that. Hachi is for us a sports director. His main responsibility is to make sure this competitive side is functioning and that we're winning games and that we have a good setup for the players to succeed in the game with each other. And then we have Owen, sports psychologist, is probably the easiest, or performance coach, some others will call it, who focuses a lot on the mental part, a lot of the personalities, the characters, nothing in-game at all. And is the guy who takes them out for all these different activities as well and have different exercises that we can do. Gets people talking. If someone clearly is holding something in, he's the guy who gets it out before it explodes, because that's the typical esports fashion. Yep. Is I'm angry, I won't say it, I will just keep being angry, I get more and more angry, and then at some point I explode. And then teams have huge issues they can't solve. His job is to make sure that doesn't happen. I kind of call him the older brother of a player who is always there for them. And then next to those guys, we then have our general manager and our team manager, Michael Ogarki, and then a team manager called Nicholas, whose job is just to make sure everything works when it comes to the office, when it comes to daily things, when it comes to Riot, all of that, so that the 4 guys can focus on the players, and then those 2 guys can take care of all the surroundings. So that's our core setup, those 6 people, which was kind of a big goal of spring, was to use that to figure out this core setup, because it was a big thing for me of the last 2 years, where, again, as I said, I think there were not enough people there every day to handle different things, and people got spread too thin. And we weren't all experts in the areas we needed to be in order to run a really high competitive team with big personalities as well, who needed to win and go to Worlds. I think that's a difference now, and a big part of me also wanting to join Misfits was I got more control over the full staff and not just the coach of who do we need, what are different roles people want to do, and that's something I've found to be successful at the moment, and something that I put a lot of faith and trust in now will make us a playoffs team here in summer.
Right,
together with some good players.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, over the weekend, segueing from that, the person that impressed a lot of people was Deficio, the mid laner.
Yeah, he was
particularly
great.
Al-Naqi. Obviously, he was going pretty ham. Right, this is a player where, even though he is someone who was in like a very good ERL team, he actually didn't seem like in spring there was much hype. Like people didn't see him as like, oh, he's going to be one of the next group to join, the humanoids and all those players that have come through over the years. I think people actually were worried he was going to go more the way of the Checker lads and the players who come up, and then they disappear again.
Especially because he was replacing Feathervin.
Sure. But this is the one thing I did notice here, which if you just go and look at the champions that he has like won the most games on in pro play, the guy is an Akali and LeBlanc player. And what is the meta right now? Like basically, you had one split experience. Now you get your champions in the meta. Like it has to be the perfect time, right?
I think it is perfect timing. He's also great on Zoe, which he used at the start of Spring Split. But yeah, this is like obviously he's a player who loves assassins. He's this classic European, rookie solo queue player who's mechanically insanely gifted. When we decided to pick him up heading into spring, it was very much because I believe in order for Misfits to become a team long-term who can consistently challenge for the top spots, and not what we've seen the last couple of years from Misfits, has been very inconsistent. Same can be said for my previous team as well. We need to be willing to take a gamble on 1 to 2 rookies with really high potential who we can build around for the future. Because we all know that what a lot of pro players love is they want to join a team with players they really respect and players that they want to play with. Like roster for them is a really high priority when they're looking, sometimes even higher than money and so on, for a lot of European players. So being willing to say Spring Split isn't really important. I've tried to do really well twice and then fail in summer. Like spring really doesn't give you that much. So we can take a player who probably wasn't ready, too young, only played 1 year in LDLC. But we took him because partly, so tryouts, he obviously stood out for sure. But also he was the player who had played like by far the most solo queue out of like any player in any role we scouted. Like we are talking like caps numbers from back when he joined the league. Insane amount of games. And in his kind of like interview process with us, where we had a lot of conversations, he literally just came in with this like perfect mindset for me, where it's like he just loves the game. All he wants to do is spam the game as much as possible. He also understands that his first year is going to potentially be bad. He's super young. He has no instant expectations for, I need to be the best player in the world already from Spring Split. He knows that it can take time, and he's also taking a gamble joining the league, early on. So it was actually a perfect fit into what we were also thinking. And I'm of the opinion now that 1 split in LEC is worth way more than even a full year in ERL, in terms of just like rapid development. If you have the right mindset, if you have the mechanics to do it as well, because a lot of scouting now, because the game is so fast paced, and you don't get punished as hard for dying early and so on. Obviously, like you scout much more for just like raw mechanics and aggression than maybe you needed to do long time ago when Monty and I were casters, and you could just like win early game but then lose at 20 minutes because you had no macro and you didn't know what you were doing against a Korean team. It's a lot different now, and you can really do well by being just mechanically very good and very aggressive. So
yeah, the game has changed a lot since those days where those early advantages and kind of skirmish ability have a lot more effect in the late game than they used to.
Yeah, exactly. And now you can stack dragons with early leads. That you can use that to also like potentially close out the game and so on. But so with Vito, he had all those things. We were fine saying we don't care about results in spring. It doesn't really matter. But he also needs then to obviously use the spring split to pick up as much as he can, which is what he wanted. And then, now he can then show much more in summer. So I think he has, I'm not going to call him, the number 1 mid laner in Europe or anything right now, but I think he's shown what 4 months of LEC, insane practice. He keeps up the solo queue numbers, what that can do to a young player with his kind of skill set. So we're obviously very happy with that. And also just the way he is as a person and growing and kind of the role he has within the team. It's his meta. obviously, as you saw, people will say Akali is broken. That's the only reason he pops off left and right. Like, that's obviously
Just
not
pop
just
on
the
him a bit
case.
harder. Come on, if you really watch with
Yeah,
your eyes, just
exactly,
pop him a bit harder.
exactly. He was definitely popping a bit harder. So yeah, I'm just very happy for him because he had such a rough time the first couple of weeks of the LEC in spring when it was very difficult, but he quickly like snapped out of that and became a much improved player very early on.
I had one other player, if you want Monty. One other player I want to ask about. It's probably going to throw people off. It wouldn't be one of the other ones. Like they'll think Razork or something, or the new Korean player. The player I want to ask about Vander, because what I noticed is this, Deficio. I noticed that when you joined Origen, you get Mithy. When you joined Misfits, you get Vander. So what this tells me is
he was a support player.
Well, and also, here's the difference though, Monty. Even though he's saying at mid lane, I want mechanics, I want aggression, right? Obviously, the supports that always get all the hype are the people who are mega aggressive, mechanical. But he's going with veterancy, maybe a captain element, like macro concept. What are you seeing? Because obviously, that's a trend there.
I mean, shot calling from support role is much easier than from a lot of other roles. Playing main engage is very difficult for newer players who might be less experienced, who might be more nervous playing, especially once they get to really stressful games. Having an old man like Vander, who knocked me out of the LEC or LCS as it was back in the day, with his Polish team together with Jankos, gives just a lot of, like, it's the backbone of the team in terms of communication, and also super trusted support. If you put him on engage and he's the only one and you need him to do it, like we saw, with his Leona and so on, his Alistar in the game against Fnatic was huge to get back into the game. I just think that's something you can pretty much guarantee with a veteran support. That doesn't mean I wouldn't want an insanely hyped up rookie support if I had other veterans in the team, obviously. Yes. But I think just the support role there just fits in super well. And also, the Vander situation coming into the year, we didn't expect him to be a free agent because he obviously was on Rogue. They had just gone to Worlds.
He looked quite pivotal as well, yeah.
Yeah, he's an important piece, right? And
I was surprised.
We thought they were maybe make one change because there was a lot of talks about changing in the top lane, right, for Ramne. That would seem like a pretty easy one for them to grab. So he became available somewhat late in that off season. But we had already done 3 weeks of tryouts at that point, and what we had noticed was with VTO in the mid lane, with Razak and so on, we needed a more experienced voice in that team. Otherwise, it would just be almost too aggressive, too crazy, and too coin flippy, at least coming into the game or into the starter split. So Vander very quickly became a really easy fit. And interestingly enough, Vander's own pitch to us was that, hey, like, I would love to join and I want to compete for the spot, but if I don't win the spot, then I want to coach and I want to like assist, behind the scene. So it became a no risk investment for us. Because again, worst case, we just got one of the most experienced and smartest players as a potential assistant coach. So obviously going for him became a bit of a no-brainer move when he was available, and he obviously ended up very quickly being a super pivotal piece. Also because what Vander does, which I like in the start, especially with newer players, is like he's very set in his way of how he wants to play, and he's like very demanding. So he gets everyone kind of on the same page early, even if they don't love it initially, they kind of forced to do it. And then from there, once they've learned his style, you can start diversifying a little bit, because now, that basic macro at least has been leveled up a bit by listening to someone who's basically played since 2014.
For sure.
Which was the same case with Mithy, because we had Patrick, who obviously had only played 1 year and was very young. So we were like, we need big voice, super experienced guy next to him to really help his development as well. And also Mithy was just insanely underrated, just because he had that one bad split a year, whatever it was, in TSM.
For sure.
So what was the pitch? I'm curious to. It's great to hear about like why you wanted Vander. But when you were creating this roster, you got brought in at the end of 2020, or like
Yeah,
I would
around
say
October. Yeah.
during Worlds, which
Yeah.
is the time where, you know, it's usually after Worlds that all the contract craziness comes up. And so you had an opportunity to think about how you wanted to operate this team. So first off, we'll get to why you signed more of these players, or the decisions, because you only ended up keeping Kabe, who had been there for a split, and then Razork, who was, I think, pretty much universally accepted as one of the top junglers in Europe last year, was a really promising rookie player overall. But why did you choose Misfits? Was it because they were going to give you the resources? Because famously, to give context on the Misfits organization, because I know Ben Spoon quite well, who's the owner, because I sold the team that became Misfits to him, and kind of kicked off his esports career, as it were. But also he as a person is he gives people like a pretty long leash. Like he doesn't micromanage a lot. He tends to trust people and empower them. And he tends to spend money as well, as we've seen. Like he tried that huge super roster with like Gorilla and Soaz that ended up falling apart, unfortunately. But it hasn't been an unwillingness to like put resources into the games that he has been participating in, particularly League of Legends. So what was it about Misfits as an organization that compelled you to join them? And what is it about the ownership that you like and allowed you to implement this structure?
Well, I think both myself and Misfits were looking to turn a page, and kind of start fresh in a way, around, you know, the League of Legends team. They were looking for someone who could lead the League of Legends side in Europe, on the ground in Europe, because obviously most of the management of Misfits are in North America, and they are in a lot of ways a North American organization with obviously Call of Duty franchise and Overwatch franchise. So they were looking for someone on the ground in Europe, and that person would then get a lot of freedom, and a lot of trust. And as I said earlier, like for me, taking one step up where I got to work more with the full staff and everything around the team itself, the office, kind of the long-term plan, the budgets as well, being part of those conversations, was what I was looking for, because I wanted less of the pure day-to-day like player management. I don't think I excelled as much as I could have in that specific role, and I acknowledge that. But I'm working very well with staff, and I'm working very well with kind of roster building. I think even though we didn't get the summer split success, I think we put together some really strong rosters. If you look at both off seasons with Origen, where a lot of people...
I'm laughing because you just tactfully said that I don't want to deal with teenager bullshit. I'm in my 30s now, and I don't want to deal with that.
Not 100% what I said, but fair enough. That's
good. I can translate for you.
Anyway, there are things that I think I've succeeded at, and then there's things I've not succeeded at, as a GM. So being able to kind of work more broad was big. I also want to go into other games eventually, which this role also allows me to do, if in case there is good opportunities. But yeah, so I think turning a page, because like for Misfits, there were, with the reputation of the last couple of years, there were some overspending, as you highlighted, on certain rosters that didn't work. There were a lot of swapping in and out of players, which made it very difficult for some people to succeed. And there was missing consistency. Like, they wanted to get away from that. I want to get away from that. And I think that's always one thing I've tried to think about a lot. And only if you are making a roster change, it really is the last solution and not something you actually want to do at all. So I like the new opportunity, the changing of the new page. And I wanted to take everything I had learned, because when you have a lot of lows, you'll get to experience a lot of situations, and you get to find, especially in hindsight, solutions to that you wanted to have done or wish you could have done in the moment, but couldn't for some reasons, or maybe you didn't have the experience to do it or whatever. But that's something you take with you going into the next thing. But you said now, when I joined in October, that the contracts are only in November and so on. Like, European off seasons, like mid-October, half the teams are already locked. Like
That's
things
true.
go insanely fast.
And also, like, you know, I'm not saying that Deficio does anything untoward, but to pretend that there aren't under the table deals and backroom dealings and hot tub parties would be a mistake. So, but yeah, so yes, it is complicated to say the least.
Well, I mean, it's a lot of fun. I think off season is insanely fun. I think the way I like to describe it is that you're trying to put a puzzle together, but the pieces keep changing all the time, and you can't predict the change the piece is going to make, because you might think you have this one player that you're going to go for, and this is the roster you're going to build, and then suddenly that player isn't available anymore. He wants to go somewhere else, or whatever happens, and everything changes around. You have all these rumors about who's going to other teams that impacts your decisions as well. There's a big part for a lot of European teams, I think, with mid lane rumors, because there were very few veteran mid lane names heading into this offseason. And there was a lot of rumors around Fnatic, obviously losing Nemesis, signing some of these veteran mids. So more teams look towards ERL mid laners, knowing that they could lock them in earlier and they could go for someone different in case, you know, Fnatic took whatever veteran mid laner there was, because they would be first priority. I think on our side now, also you mentioned the money part, like a big goal actually for us and for me as well was to stabilize budget and spend less.
You had a lot of practice with that, to be fair. So
I mean, yeah, it's not the first off season.
Where you were it though, mate. I'll tell you what, if people knew what budget you were working with, you put some fucking sick players on those 2 years. I don't care what the summer results were. Like a lot of other people wouldn't get those players for that money. I'll tell you that.
Thank you. I'll take that as a very big compliment. But yeah, so spending a bit less on player salaries, but still being willing to spend on like office, living situation, activities, surroundings, whatever it is around players that can have a lot of impact during the year. Also was a good reason for us to go and look at, okay, we want to get, at least 2 rookies with a lot of mechanical skill who we can develop during spring. And then if they develop really well, they can become really core pieces of the team already for summer, because I don't believe in the whole 1 year thing. I think you do in League of Legends now in esports, like it's fine to sacrifice 1 split. Don't sacrifice 2. That's not a thing. Things go too fast. People can develop too quickly in 1 split. So you can sacrifice the spring split, but then you have to be able to perform it in the summer. And this 2-year plan kind of thing that teams used to do in the past, or used to talk about in the past, isn't really a thing. Also, just with the way the game is being played and how many good rookies there are. I think Mad Lion showed that. I think Rogue has showed that really well. Like 1 split is enough for your team to reach a certain level, and then you can become a really good team. So like that's kind of the model as well we wanted to follow, but also why we wanted, of course, to keep Raza, keep Kobe, so we had some pieces from before. There are good players, and that we knew where the staff, at least the part of the staff that stayed in Hachi and our GM Michael, already knew how to work with these players as well. But then we had to rebuild the rest of the staff, and obviously also got in some new names. And then we also had in the support situation, of course, we wanted to keep Denik as well, and then have him, because he provides a lot outside of the game for a team as well. And then it became that competition between the 2 supports for that starting role, which Vander in the end ended up winning, and obviously also why we allowed Denik to go over to Excel in this offseason.
Monty, did you have more like Misfits related stuff? Because I have like an indulgence of just something I personally want to know. It's just something I'm curious about.
Yeah,
so
I'll ask for one more Misfits related question, because I find what you have done very interesting, because you took kind of 2 long-term veterans in Kabe and Vander, took kind of a player who has a very high upside and a very promising rookie year in Razork, and kept him on. Now you got rid of Febivin, which his performance wasn't great. Like, he wasn't the Febivin of old, like, let's be real. But I think a lot of people would not have been bold enough to make that decision. And then not only that, but you got your 2 rookies or your solo laners, which I don't think many people would do that. Like, have your mid and top laners be the new players on this roster.
So solo lane region as well. So
yeah. So and it's proven to work really well. Like, I think here it's very good also. I know here it's been kind of in Europe for a while. How's his English as a Korean player? First off.
For competitive gaming, it's very good. Much better than we have seen from some previous imports who came over. I think part of that is he has a very outgoing nature, so he tries to naturally talk a lot. And then he spent the time in LDLC already in Europe, and then he was in Turkey as well for one split. So he spent about a year minimum already speaking English. And we obviously also brought him over because Enatron had worked with him in Turkey, and Michael, our GM, had scouted and interviewed him the year before, where they wanted to try him out, and really liked him. So like those two guys kind of pitched him forward, and then he joined the top lane pool. And because we had Aggressivo, who is one of the best ERL top laners, we felt very safe going for that gamble as well, because that was kind of a big part of what we wanted to have with like a really strong academy team, was to be able to also take someone in and then have two guys compete a bit for the spot initially before locking down a start and not keep swapping. You can't keep swapping all the time.
I mean, one thing obviously you're trying to say as well there that goes without saying is either way, whoever's on the academy team is going to be a really good top laner. If they just are two of the best ERL top laners, so you'll be in a good spot either way. Yeah, exactly.
And the academy team was very important for us because we wanted an academy team obviously with players who could compete for starting spots and pressure there naturally, and we wanted a team who could be super competitive in ERL because we're in the French league, and we learned very early on in the offseason that there were two new organizations coming in BDS and K-Corp. They come in with money, they come in with fan bases, they come in with ambition. Then you have all the traditional French organizations, you have Vitality's academy team. So we were like, okay, there are 6-7 teams here who is literally willing to spend really good money on ERL players and trying to build super competitive rosters. So we're like, being part of that is huge because one, obviously it's great for just like the competition, the branding in itself, but also this is the best for for good young talented players to be part of because they can show themselves way more and they can improve way more in such a competitive league. And that's obviously a key part of having an academy team as well. So that became a pretty clear investment early, which again also has given us a lot of nice internal competition actually, without it ever being threatening people left and right that you're going to get benched, because that's obviously not what we do. And I don't believe in swapping people in just like every week, because I think that just ruins team chemistry too much, obviously. But having a really strong academy, I think, is crucial. And also in case emergencies do happen, not being able to put in a good player so you just forfeit the week is like super doomed in a 9-week regular season. Which is going to be very close, obviously.
Right, let's do it then. Here we go. Thorin's curiosity segment.
Oh, God.
So here's the thing, Deficio. As far as I can tell, you effectively added years to the career of Nukeduck with your work. Some tongue-in-cheek, some also, you did think he was a very good player. On the desk, obviously, with the Year of the Duck. It was like some fucked up Chinese kind of where every year's the Year of the Duck. It's like that thing with the clock's like, I guess it's this time, it's every single thing's on it. Right? When you did this, I would say extended his career. I would say it made him a lot more money or something like, but he was in Origin for 2 years after that. So we all know that ain't the case. But here's the thing. A lot of people, after these last 2 splits, they're out completely on Nukeduck. A lot of people were like, it's time for him to retire. Nobody, it feels like no fan wanted him in LEC anymore. Like this guy went from one of the top mid laners to like, he's not even allowed to be on the worst team. And so then there's a situation where I noticed when Youngbok picked up him to excel now, again, people were like, why are you doing this? Why not first of all, why not give Chekolad more time? Maybe they think the Vethio angle, like he's going to be good in the summer, or why not go with another ERL player? There's always a few coming through in every EU Masters, right? He's taken a big gamble doing that. And considering he himself, he hasn't made playoffs a lot, he's gambling a lot of his reputation on Nukeduck there. He's not doing it lightly. Like that's a big deal, It's kind of the one that could potentially change his fortunes or doom him to be considered he was just carried by good players, which is what fans will say. So I thought you'll be someone who has some insight, and listen, you know how to talk on camera. You'll be doing it for like 10 minutes every question here. So I trust you to be able to carefully give us some info without spoiling anything. Right? What would you say? How would you explain like the fall of Nukeduck and like what are your expectations from him now? Like how can you carefully give us some sort of insight? Because as I say, he went from being a guy where you had like 15 champions, he's an amazing side laner. All of a sudden, last 2 splits, people just think he's not good anymore.
I mean, I think Nukeduck himself did talk a bit about publicly because I don't know too much about that side, but he was talking about how he had to step down from Astralis halfway through spring and take a personal break. I think so. When we signed Nukeduck, so this was now 2.5 years ago. There was a ton of competition for him. We were competing with C9 and some other NA teams, and then we were competing against, I think it was 3 or 4 EU teams probably for him. He had just had the Schalke final run where he obviously was one of the key players. My first signing was Andre, who was the head coach of Schalke. And obviously we sat down and were starting to build a roster. And for mid lane, there was Nukeduck as a veteran name, and then there was maybe Niski. Nobody knew what was happening with Splice at the time, whether or not he was going to be available or not, and so on. And then it would be rookie mid laners, effectively, from what people were looking at the time. Because this was when I believe February had just had his bad split in North America.
Yes.
With Clutch, and then he got signed by Misfits after. So he wasn't really in the pool there. So with Nukeduck, you had this player who just had a fantastic year, who was for sure the biggest name available, who will attract other players as well, which is such a key part of building a roster. Like if you want to build a super competitive roster, you need to be able to find players
to help
that
you get
others,
upset, etc. Yeah, a bunch of
yeah. I mean, a big part of getting Alfari was that we had already gotten Nukeduck on board. So he was obviously the highest profile signing we did there. And I think, looking back, I still think that was the correct choice. Because one, he again brought in other players. He had, I believe he was in the MVP running for this first spring split we had, where we headed to the finals. And he was, doing super well. So like he brought in what we needed from him. I don't know. I mean, I think part of it is motivation after competing for 5-6 years. It became much harder for him to do what he actually used to do very well, which was very wide champion pool, be a very active player in solo queue, and like really like dive into all kinds of different things in the game that other people weren't necessarily thinking about in how he wanted to play, which is also why he was such a good split pusher. And he was able to always like do well individually in that role. I think part of that maybe made it harder for him. And then also I just think when we failed in the first summer, that hit him insanely hard, because this was the team that had all the pieces.
That was at least supposed to go to Worlds, let's be real, if not win the title, right?
Yeah, go straight to Worlds. We had just made the final in the first one. Yes, we lost to G2 super fast, but we beat Fnatic in the semifinal there. And going into that summer split, the whole atmosphere was, we need to be more like G2. We need to practice like G2. We need to play as many different things as G2. And that ended up being really hard for the team. It was actually a team that was much better when things were really stable, and it was like kind of the same things being done every day and every game. But that was one of the learnings, obviously, in hindsight. But I think then going into the next year, like, I don't think he played bad. That's my honest opinion on that. But I can understand that when you look at his name, you look at him being a mid laner in Europe, you need more impact than what he had last year.
I don't think people would say he played badly. I think that he's very consistent. That's always been his thing. But you have to surround him with players who are going to do something, who are flashier, or who are going to be like the true carries of the roster. I think that's the criticism.
Yeah,
so his upside is not huge, but he also has a very high floor.
I think that was the biggest change between year 1 and year 2, which I can't say why that happened. He was a very demanding player in terms of what he wanted to do and what he wanted other people to do for the majority of the first year, which you need to be able to do as a mid laner in Europe, because you can't just let the other guys do it against you and set you behind. They get mid prior, they use that to take over the rest of the map. Or if you're playing a split pusher, you need to be able to coordinate your team so that they're setting you up to succeed as the split pusher. He was extremely good at that in the first year, and did less of that in the second year, which I think also impacted his own carry potential. But I think what happens sometimes in the community is people get really tired of one specific name, and they don't understand why that person continues to be there. And then a lot of extra hate comes in, which is completely unnecessary and completely uncalled for. Like, Nukeduck isn't on Excel because he's best friends with Youngbuck.
Sure.
Like,
That's a Reddit narrative and a half, isn't it?
he's on Excel because they did tryouts. They did tryouts for like multiple weeks, because I know that because of Denik, they did tryouts with Denik. And they found him to be the best fit and the strongest fit for the team. He had his break, came back much more motivated. That's what he talked about himself. Like, they pick him for a reason. And as you said as well, Thorin, like, they're putting a lot on this because it is a very risky PR move, to do this right now. But they obviously believe that he can add way more to the team than whatever other option they had. And Excel is a team who literally lacked voices and leaders, like, big time, which is why they have Denik and Nukeduck now, because they're two people who will literally tell you, when things are going well for them, this is how we need to play, this is what we need to do, and can that way add something to a team that was probably missing that, based on what they were talking about as well, from before. So I really hope for the best for Nukeduck. I think he's such a great guy, and I think the hate he's getting is just uncalled for. But then again, I can't stop people from typing whatever they want on Reddit and Twitter. That's up to them. I know Nukeduck doesn't read 99% of it, so I don't think it impacts him necessarily that badly.
I'll give you one angle that people don't seem to actually take into account. This is a pretty significant one, right? We all give the junglers like leeway when their whole style gets nerfed, when their fucking champion pool gets, if someone's like a god on Lee Sin and they make it tank junglers, we understand it's going to be difficult for that guy. He's not going to be at his peak. He's going to have to learn to play the game a different way. Nukeduck's entire fucking strength of side laning was removed from the game effectively in 2020. And so what ended up happening? Think about how Larson came into the LEC and was dominating. I just play Oriana. I'm just a fucking mid laner. Let's have some dragon fights. I'm winning fucking team fights. This is awesome. That's the opposite of a Nukeduck. I don't want to see Nukeduck on fucking Oriana like that. I imagine it makes sense what you're saying about the communication there, Deficio. One thing I've always said is if you're the really, really good split pusher, you should be shot calling all the time, because you have to be able to tell people how they're going to play around what you're doing. You have to constantly communicate, like, I can extend a bit here, so maybe hold off here. No, they're going to come now, so we're going to have to regroup. If all of a sudden you're just a basic bitch guy having to play fucking Oriana every game and have a dragon fight, like, you're in for a hard time. And then also, who were the players who were like the ones who had some issues, or with the rookies? It's his jungle support, the people who are helping set some of this stuff up. So to me, it's like, I'm not giving excuses. If you think he played bad, he played bad. At the end of the day, the results are the results. But if you were trying to design a way to make it like the nightmare simulator for Nukeduck, 2020 might have been it, just saying. And by the way, it's not like Astralis was an awesome team this split, so it's not like you had an awesome team going in there. So I still don't hold out hope. I still think when you're a player who's played as long as he has and been as good as he has, it's certainly possible to have a comeback split. Certainly,
they can definitely have a comeback split for sure. I think he has to be together with Patrick, literally the 2-star players on Excel, if they're going to make playoffs. Like, all eyes are going to be on those two guys. It was actually the whole killing split push, the dragon stacking. It was such a hit to us when we had Alfari and Nukeduck. We literally were like, so good when we could get them ahead early. Alfari would just get ahead on his own, right? He would just like run over whoever he was against, and then a jungle support could coordinate with Nukeduck for mid lane specifically, and then we would put them on two champions who would outscale 1v1 against whatever mid and top the other guys had. And you would then put them in two side lanes, and the game was like slow paced enough that they couldn't just 4-stack dragons at like 20 minutes or whatever. Like, it was such a strong play style to have, unless you played against G2 in best of fives. But then when that became, because if you guys remember, the first split with the dragon stacking was literally just like instant stack strong dragons on 3 dragons. Enemy team has to fight you. So the first team fight in the game would be guaranteed to happen at like 18 minutes already. And by that time, like, you have had no time to have any impact on a strong 1v1 character. And we tried to pick them, and then we had to go into team fighting against like Azir, whatever, Kai'Sa, stuff like this. And you're like running in with like trying to flank them or whatever around the dragon because you have to fight it. And then it was just like so difficult to play. which is a huge shame.
Think about the timeline here he's talking about. He builds a team that should essentially be the gods of split pushing, and they have fucking Mithy as the support player as well. Like, if I'm the GM, it's like, oh, this is amazing. I've won the league. I've done it. I've actually done it. Without all the money, I've gotten like second or third best player by like fan ranking of every role except Mithy. And then Mithy's like a genius at the game. And I've got these amazing split pushes. This is Europe, baby. This is what it's all about. And then it's like, and the game's being changed. We're removing that slowly from the game. It's like, as a GM, how are you supposed to plan for that? You don't know that in the off season. You know, they don't tell you in your ear, but here's what we're going to do to the game. Like, you don't know, do you? You think just nerfed.
Definitely sucked. I'll say that much. Definitely sucked. Could still made worlds. We lost that last game to Splice in the gauntlet.
Yeah.
Sadly. No excuses for last summer, obviously. Just no excuses.
I mean, to be fair, you had a sub jungler. You had Zanzara, like obviously Cold had to go out the line. Yeah, there was a lot there.
That's what yeah. You know, the summer split in 2019 is where I'm just sad because we had the team to do it, right? And then things happened, and in the end, we also had to play, of course, with Zanzara, right? And he obviously did a really, really great job stepping in on such short notice, and he was playing EU Masters like at the same time, so he didn't even like really he like only scrimmed like I think 2 days with us or something, and then he like had to sub in while he was also playing EU Masters on the side. And we took Spice to 5 games there, and before they 3-0'd Schalke in the next game, like I look back at that and I'm just like really unhappy. I'm not mad about anything. I'm just really unhappy and like sad that we didn't make Worlds there. Where last summer, obviously, there's just more regrets because things could have been done much different to get a much better result than what we got, obviously.
Fair enough. By the way, Monty, I know you want to do like the vitality topics. Let's just do that now.
Yeah. I'm really interested in your take on this just because there's been so much hype around Vitality coming into this split. And I think for me, your game against Vitality was very telling about both of your teams and the current state of who is good in LEC right now. And as much excitement as there has been around Vitality, it seems like their solo lanes, Leader and SLT, are still very behind when it comes to knowing where to be on the map at a given time. And that was exposed very obviously in your game that you played as Misfits against them, because they were reacting very weirdly to a lot of your like lane pressure, teleports, jungle invades. You guys were ahead in the early game and closed the game out very easily, but at the same time, it's hard for me not to get excited about Vitality because you can really see the upside there, right? Like the individual ability, the style of game that they play is super exciting. It just doesn't feel like Selfmade has a lot of support. And I tweeted out, like, I was surprised that the choice was SLT because for me, Soaz would be an obvious player from a GM perspective that you would want in this team to kind of stabilize a lot of the aggression and have that veteran voice and veteran presence around some players that demand a lot of resources and also may not have the best kind of shot calling within the game. And his level of consistency would be pretty amazing, I think, in this roster.
I think, that logic makes a lot of sense. I think they follow the same scouting or team building, plan now that, as I said a bit earlier, a lot of teams do, where you look much more at just like pure mechanics, exactly, as much as you can when you try and
maybe solo queue rank and things,
all stuff like that, and what kind of champ pool do they have from ERL? Is it Maokai every game? On a really strong team and they win that way? Or is it like, a lot of carry picks? Does his ERL team play around him? Is he able to use that to win games and like snowball and so on? And I think they follow that same, because like the entire lineup literally is just built around mechanics. Labrov is... Sure.
But that's my point. That's my point, Martin. Is
but then
you need a balance to that.
I think their philosophy, which I can follow, and I think the philosophy of the players on the team who is part of building the roster as well, like, let's be real here, players have big say and big impact on roster building, was, again, in the same style like that they're playing in. Is like, we want a top laner who they believe can become someone who can play all the different carries, who can win his lane hard, who potentially with resources or whatever can do a lot. Their issue they're going to have, obviously, in summer is, I think, the self-made investment, because he's only signed for this split.
Yes.
The self-made investment screams, win now. We must win now. The SLT investment does not scream, we
Correct.
must win now. That
And
screams,
he also,
we're taking a gamble.
He also was the biggest problem for them in the game that they played against you.
Well, I feel bad for him because his role in a team of leader self-made, who will always prioritize mid lane, and Labrov support, who is one of the best individual supports in all of the West, who naturally plays to win lane hard with a fairly aggressive AD carry and Crown Shot, who is very vocal as well in the game.
Yes.
And naturally, when you have very vocal players, they tend to call for more opportunities that you then as a team end up listening and looking towards than maybe I could imagine a less vocal rookie top laner. So what happened in our game was like, so he's playing against Renekton and he has a TP bot early.
Yep.
Most likely due to a team call saying TP, like we can do something here.
It's because you guys were playing properly around your lane pressure and invaded onto self-made, and self-made
and then they
called for the TP.
Exactly. And then his lane is completely screwed now. He then gets dove right after because obviously Vander is just like, guys, like, look at this guy. He's already behind. We can just dive him. Let's go top VTO. And VTO's like, yeah, let's go. And then they go kill him. Then a follow-up game from Razork where we kill him again. And he gets obviously no help because at that point he's too far behind. They're never going to win 2v2. They're never going to win 3v3. And it's just really, really hard. So I think that's going to be Vitality's biggest challenge is how do you make him have an impact for what you actually signed him for insanely quickly so that you have a top laner you can also utilize on a team who is naturally gonna demand bot lane, mid lane focus.
Exactly. It's what I'm saying. They seem
so the logic you're having makes a lot of sense.
They seem overburdened when it comes to their resource allocation. Like, you know that Crown Shot on SK was used to getting 100% of the resources, right? And he's a great player. He can carry. Leader's a player who is very flashy and wants to have a lot of punch in the game. And I would just much rather see a Soaz or a Cabashard in the top lane rather than a carry top lane rookie. Now, I think they could go a different direction. They could say, maybe we want more of a weak side rookie to kind of be subservient and
they
take
just don't
that
really
role.
exist anymore.
That's
they're almost
fair.
impossible to find. If you look at all the dominant top laners at the moment on the top EOL teams, like they're all playing super hard. Like Orome would maybe be kind of the person you could think about there from Excel, but Excel have zero reason to sell him right now to Vitality. So because I imagine they can look at Orome as a potential long-term solution on their side as well. So they might not have had other options if they were looking on the rookie route. Because most of the players right now that are rising up the ranks in ERLs are in the very same kind of style of what their main skill set is, at least from a rookie perspective. But yeah, he's tough because he needs to win now. Like SLT literally needs right now to learn everything he needs to learn to fit into this team because, again, the investments they made are screaming, we need to win in summer. And they went 10th, 9th, and 10th in the last 3 splits. So it obviously makes sense why they want to try and go all in.
I think it's really hard for Vitality as well, because what people won't know is that they were trying to throw money around this last offseason. So at the end of 2020, they tried to go big. They're not short on cash, guys. They're not coasting.
They had tickets in the Perks lottery, put it that way.
Yes. Yeah. So they
would have gone super team if they'd have gotten him, by the way. That goes without saying. That was the plan, as far as I know.
Right. And you have to look at the way they're spending in other games. Like, they signed Zywoo and Counter-Strike to like a 3-year deal. So they're certainly willing to...
Deal.
What?
5-year deal.
Oh, 5-year deal. Excuse me.
Yeah, well, maybe they extended it 3 or something. It might be that. They also, by the way, literally paid for like a veteran player in Shocks, like something like $300,000 at the end of like 2019. So they spend money. People don't know this. This is actually one of the factors. Same with Misfits. Like, people in League still look in the server. And so, for example, that's why they overestimated where Origen's spending power was. They thought, look at these players. They're one of the top teams. Like, mate, the idea they were even contention for the spring splits like of the first season, that's fucking insane. Then you go in these teams. Actually, it's actually, to me, a bit appalling when a team like Vitality can be last place. Like, what the fuck? You have money to spend. Like, that's it. You just don't have the right coach to get it, the right person to get buy-in from the players. People don't want to join your team, maybe. Like, there's other factors at play sometimes.
I think what Martin said earlier was very telling in that I think what they suffered from was if you cannot land the core player, that's like the magnet that attracts the rest of the players to your roster, because it really is a game of dominoes where the right domino has to fall and then the rest of them go. In terms of GMing, it's more like GMing in the NBA, right? It's the same concept where you attract the star player, and then like suddenly there's like 3 star players on your team. And I think it wasn't from Vitality's lack of effort, because they put a lot of effort into trying to buy some good players. It didn't happen, and they got lucky in a way where they kind of like got crown shot, which I think was a key piece for them. In order to now affect these kind of bigger changes. They were fortunate. They're kind of waiting for Fnatic to blow up. There is kind of a sense of a changing in the guard of LEC, where the G2 and Fnatic especially Fnatic are no longer dominant. They're certainly flailing right now. And so it's opened up opportunities for these other players to go to rosters or teams that they may not have considered previously, which has benefited you, and it's also benefited Vitality, and I think will continue to do so. But I agree. I think it's not throwing shade at SLT, because I think we've only seen a few games. We don't know what his upside is going to be. I just find it very confusing from a GM perspective as to why you would make that decision when otherwise everything else is so good. And there's still time. Maybe they will sign, a player. Maybe I don't think K Corp's going to give up Cabashard, unfortunately for them.
He would be expensive.
He would be expensive.
Buyouts are not cheap,
and especially because here's the other thing that we need to consider is that Schalke has basically announced that they're going to be selling their roster, and so if you had to pick a front runner for if they have the funds. Certainly, Riot would probably be very amenable to K-Corp with their massive fan base that has been powering like the amateur French scene to come in and bring a lot of that audience over into LEC. So
they're a super strong organization to get in, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, it's
100%.
I don't know what their resources are like, but you would believe that with their fan base, they would be able to get some investors on board who could potentially buy that slot. And then clearly, I think their plan would be to transition Cabashard into that slot.
I mean, they would probably keep the lineup they have right now, which functions really well. They are, the strongest ERL team, and they won EU Masters as well just before and 3-0'd us in the French final as well. But it is like with players in offseason, like generally there are like 4 reasons or 4 priorities they have when you talk to them. Like obviously money is one, the organization is another one. Then there's the roster, and then desperation can be there as well in case you have no other offers. But that one has kind of died out in Europe, because going to a top ERL team is actually considered sometimes a better move than going to a bottom LEC team. Much higher chance that you can look great for a year, and then you will get offered a nice contract to get back into the LEC. So the whole roster shuffling in and out.
Of being in the last team, basically, because they think that you basically get leaded. You just get, kick him out, he's not good. Yeah.
I mean, it's there's a high chance that you can look worse than you are, obviously.
Sure.
And there's a great chance you can look really good in the Euros. Like take Aroma again as a really great example. Like I think he completely changed his reputation and his name in the last EU Masters, where he had an amazing performance, where before that what a lot of people remembered was him getting removed from Mad Lions, obviously after Worlds. And I think what we're seeing there is, first of all, top ERL teams are paying good salaries. Like they're not paying 1k euro a month and you can barely live on that. Like they are paying very competitive salaries, like they can range from 3 to 7, 8k or whatever.
Sure, especially if it's like the French league and the ones that are the big ones as well. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly, like depending on who it is and so on, and which organization it is. So it is a very viable career path to take that step down. So that desperation one's kind of gone. And now the trick really is, if like when you talk to players, you will very quickly learn what is the number one prior. Is it the org they're joining? In most cases, it's not. Is it the money they're getting, or is it the roster you have? And in like 9 out of 10 cases in Europe, roster is always the main conversation with that player.
Makes sense.
And then they sometimes have that NA backup option of the money prior that they can take, but they go very aggressively into the offseason with an agent or without an agent, and they try and like really look at rosters. They look at other players who are free agents. They talk to each other, obviously, as players, and see where other people are going. And they use that a lot in conversation, which is why it's so important for a team to find 1 or 2 names that grow quickly and that other players really want to play with, because it gives you so much more power in an off season. And that's what the Mad Lions and Rogue model really has been over the last couple of years, where they came in with rookie teams with the kind of core they have now, and then they were very aggressive in the off seasons of keeping their centerpieces and extending them as long as they can and spend the money there, and then use those centerpieces to look for upgrades where they felt there were upgrades available, like Odo Amne coming into Rogue now. Like Odo Amne is joining Rogue because he looks at that lineup as his main prior, and he goes, this is really my ticket to Worlds, potentially an LEC title.
Yes.
And that model is why you can go for that investment into rookies. You can gamble a year, or a split at least, as long as you scout properly. You should still be competitive by summer for playoffs, and then play aggressive in the next offseason with your centerpieces, Larsen inspired on Rogue, gave them Hansama the next offseason, and then the next one, Odo Amne Trimpi. Boom, here you have your lineup now. Vander before obviously was also a strong piece. And then Mad Lions have done the same. Humanoid, Carsey, and Kaiser are now the core that they could use to then pull in, whichever names. Like El Yoya was pretty much a done deal before I'd even joined Misfits, because he knew I want to play in this team, 100%. And obviously he's been a huge asset for them.
Great.
Massive investment for them. Yeah, that's part of the off-season puzzle as well. That it's always hard to guess which players are now looking to play with each other as part of when you're trying to build your roster. Because I guess it's a good thing in Europe. Money isn't everything.
Yes.
And I consider that a part of why we probably have a much healthier ecosystem at the moment compared to North America.
I mean, if people don't know, it was basically the same thing with Limit. I mean, he even said it himself. Basically, he actually got a higher offer, supposedly from SK, but he didn't know what the roster was going to be, and he had no clue it was going to be all rookies and stuff. So instead, he went to Schalke, the team that had obviously done that miracle run. Like, he's going to fit right in really nicely there. Players were starting to percolate. Abadage, a bunch of good players. So, yeah, I can see why it does seem to check out, like a bunch of players. Selfmade just left Fnatic. He did that because he thought, I want to play with Leader, I want to play in this other team. So, yeah, it's interesting because we've sort of gone full circle now. That's what Europe used to be. It used to be about you just want to join the sickest roster.
I mean, actually, yeah, it used to be a lot of that. And it used to be, if you joined the sickest roster, you could pull other players with you, famously Perks, GM of the century, with all the work he did in G2. Like, that would not have happened as effective and as fast as it did without Perks, because like they had one split where him and Trick are like the MVP and the rookie, and instantly every player in Europe is like, I want to play with those two guys, and then they could pull the trigger and they could get in Sven, Mithi, and so on, and then they made that lineup that won for like a year and a half, and that really started the G2 snowball in a lot of ways that then Carlos and the brand obviously did a great job of running with. So that was a really good example of, again, also a little bit of that Rogue Mad Lions case we're seeing right now, which is a very good model to have.
That's like Perks got some money from one business, and then, I'm going to make up a random year here. Then in, like 2002, he invested into like Google stock when he first heard about it. Then he took his money from that when it went up and he made Amazon stock. It's like, fucking hell, mate. What's this parlay? This is ridiculous. But you're right, it all starts with one player. Like, that meme everyone's doing right now with the big domino pieces. And it's like at the end, you have like, like fucking Perks is the greatest player of all time, or whatever. Yeah. The first domino is just like, he wins like the first split with a slightly dodgy team when like the league was a bit of parity, and then it's everything just comes from there. If that first thing doesn't happen, the rest doesn't happen either.
Yeah, I mean, Caps left Fnatic after Fnatic had just won 2 splits to go to G2. That doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't.
Unless he's looking at what G2 is having on their roster and he's like, that's better than what I have here, and I want to go there and play with that. Otherwise, he technically took a step down from a pure results.
By the way, another GM move of the century. Fuck, the problem is our rival team has got the only player that's better than me. Unless... That's fucking genius, mate. That's genius. That's genius.
Well, G2 always been aggressive on the market, which is a very good thing for G2.
I don't want to overstate the fall of G2 because clearly they're going to continue to be an elite team. You know, they're going to contend for the title. But with both Fnatic is questionable, dodgy at this point in time. But considering that you have been either playing or casting or GMing in Europe for so long, and it really just has been this saga of G2 and Fnatic dominance forever now at this point in time. And now you're in a situation where the scene is much more volatile. You don't just automatically lose to these. As a GM, you don't automatically lose to these teams because they're just going to take the best players, and there's really nothing you can do to be competitive in terms of your offers with them. What are your thoughts on everything shifting right now towards, Mad Lions, towards Rogue, before Abadage left towards Schalke, Vitality now with this exciting roster, you guys on Misfits doing very well to start off this summer split. How has it changed for you as a GM? Do you feel like you can be more competitive at this point in time?
I think so. The pool of players, there was a period, like just when we got the franchise spot. I remember looking at the pool of players and being like, man, there really isn't that many names from a veteran point of view to go for. And we were kind of waiting on a new wave of great players to enter. And, eventually someone would take a gamble on a rookie and that guy could be the one, which is when we got that Humanoid, Larson, Nemesis trio that year coming in, which kind of changed the mid lane part at least a bit, where suddenly there were more competitive names now to go for. I think because of the ERL system being as strong as it is, it feels way safer. And there's way more footage. There's a lot more feedback to get on rookie players or even on players who's been in the LEC who's then dropped out and can then go back in, that the pool of players available is much bigger right now, which makes it easier to have a competitive off season, even with G2 Fnatic, to get really competitive rosters. And that's even with losing some key players, obviously, to North America. So I think that part is positive. But I also just think the way the game is, I don't know if I'm an old man now who's just angry and remembers the old times. But
if so, welcome.
True. I'm in good company then.
That third spot for a while. Exactly.
Yeah. I feel that, again, the game, because it's like the champions in the game, the new champions, the rework champions, that is way more explosive. There's way more damage. Their turret plates, their shorter death times, their dragon stacking, their heralds. Like the first 20 minutes of the game, you can just do so much, even if you're not as smart as the other team and maybe you don't have the same experience as the other team, compared to if you go back some years where it's like they would just choke you out with vision.
I mean, that was my jam, man. I'm a macro enthusiast, so
right. So back then, I feel like if you didn't have smart veteran players who had gone through that and who understood a lot of what was happening, sometimes you wouldn't have a chance. When you played against original G2, the one with Sven, Mithy, Perks, Trick, and Expect, or Kikis, I guess, shortly, but then Expect, their games used to be really boring, because they would literally just like be stronger than you in laning phase, and then they would just take over the map, and there would just be like almost no action unless G2 wanted there to be action. So it was really hard to play against that if you brought in new players all the time and so on. But I think the way the game is now is you just get so rewarded for mechanics and for playing aggressive and for be able to take one-on-one fights, 2v2 fights, having an aggressive jungler who wants to do more in the early game. That again, you can make games look much more even versus even a veteran team like G2. I think Mad Lions has definitely showed that 100%. I think in best of ones, a lot of teams are showing that versus G2 as well, which makes the level, like the playing field, looks more even because of that. Not saying you don't still need to be a smart team and have macro, but I think you can just hide it more because of the way the game is. And like, look at the new champions. Like Gwen comes into the game who just like flies around everywhere and get like one shot half the enemy team and so on. Like that just rewards you having mechanically insane players who's willing to take a 50-50 or a 40-60 and trust their mechanics to outplay it, which is what G2 obviously also likes to do in some cases. So yeah, I think bigger player base or bigger pool of players, and then the way the game is now rewards early aggression, which is easier to get than getting smart macro veterans that you could get in the past. That would be almost impossible to beat. And I guess Caps is slightly more human now compared to how ahead of the competition he was a couple of years ago, where you play against Caps, and mid lane is it just sucks. I think we were one of the only teams who sometimes had answers against it back in 2019 until the final. Then we didn't. I think compared to Humanoid and Larson, there's a little bit more of they're a bit closer. Caps is still the best mid laner in the West for sure, but the gap isn't as big as it was before, and that one star player isn't able to do the same he did previously.
Do you think that? One last question.
One last question along these lines.
Some viewer questions after this. So
yeah, it's true. Do you think that the change to items to add more active items exacerbated this kind of mechanics problem? Because that was the big change that came in this year, and it just seems
even Reckless is using fucking actives now. What's this shit? That fucking Prowler's Claw, whatever. What is this shit?
The dash one?
Yes.
I mean, it probably did. I think because from what I understood, at least, I don't think I'm an expert on items.
Fair enough.
Far from anymore. But the intention, from what I understood when they made the changes, was to add more power, on 1 to 2 items, right? And not how many champions in the game are 4-item champions anymore? And we used to have a ton of those. But we as casters, we'd be just wait for Sivir, wait, more waves. Now we have all the crit items. Now we can go and Sivir will just win the team fight. That doesn't really exist anymore. Already in 1 or 2 items, most AD carries are able to dish out, way more damage than what used to be meta AD carries. So I think that surely has part of it as well. But I don't call myself an analyst anymore, so don't take what I'm saying here for anything. That's just my feeling when I'm watching the game, at least. I'm nothing is happening. Oh, someone got one shot. All right, cool. I guess fight is on. And it's also why I feel goal leads mean less almost, because a 4K goal lead now, most people are playing a lot of squishy comms, and the other team still has a ton of damage even if they're 4K down. It's not some big tank who's unkillable, who's standing in front of you, and you're behind in gold. Your AD carry deals 10 damage to him on every hit, and you just can't win. It feels now if you get a good engage, you can one-shot pretty much any champion or close to any champion. So I guess it gives a bit more of that comeback factor, which is a positive for the game. But then again, I'm just a fan watching.
All right, fair enough. Well, thanks, Deficio. We appreciate you joining us. We are going to do some fan questions, which we will not subject you to. We'll let you... Sweet. He hates fan questions. Never on Twitter any longer, as we learned earlier. But do appreciate we all are. We all are now. We've definitely joined the ranks of the boomers. So thanks for coming on. Really pleasant talking with you again. Hopefully we'll get you on maybe later this year once you make Worlds, which I consider an inevitability after your 3-0 start. So
just week one. Just week one.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We're going to be back with fan questions in just a couple of minutes. We'll see you then. Okay, we're back for fan questions. As a reminder, how you get to ask questions, because Thorin always reminds me to remind you, but I remembered this time myself. You can go to the Summoning Insight Discord. It will be in the YouTube description, or you can type #Discord on the Twitch chat, and then GrogCoin. Go to rally.io. There are instructions in the GrogCoin Lounge channel in a pinned comment. If you hold 25 Grog coins, then you get access to the channel, and we will answer your questions on the show. So very good times, very good times. So with that, here's one about Riot. Riot is tight-lipped about most of their stats. I feel like pro view numbers would be important to esports as a financial model. I agree with you. Is this info as important as I think to the larger esports players like ESL, Blast, Valve? Yes. The information is extremely important because basically what happened in esports is that before publishers took over esports, so in the days before Riot, Blizzard really wasn't spending a lot of money, and it was tournament operators like MLG or IPL or GOM TV, GSL, ESL. Now, they would get licenses from the tournament organizers, but a lot of it was pay-per-view because that was very crucial to the monetization of the industry. When publishers took it over, Riot basically decided, well, we're going to make everything free to watch. Which was great for marketing League of Legends and for them to get players hooked, and those players would spend money in their game, but very bad for tournament organizers trying to monetize. So the fact that this new kind of premium service exists is both good for us, because frankly, I don't mind paying for it. And most people before publishers did it for free didn't mind paying for esports. There were tens of thousands of people paying. And I think that it's great overall. And I think that information and that knowledge is very important to monetizing the scene, because we have to think about ways, esports doesn't have weekly tickets at stadiums that can be sold for millions of dollars to fill up a 15,000 person arena. Those events are rare. And so we have to think about different ways to monetize. And one of the ways we can do it, which traditional sports can't offer, is watching through the professional players' perspectives. So yeah, I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, I'll set, obviously, disclaimer as usual, I own stock in the company that made ProView, so I think it's a wonderful thing. No, but one of the reasons I also think it's actually mad underrated is just go and listen to people like LS and people who watch some of the ProViews. They'll tell you, like, it's a game changer in terms of being able to tell, is this new player actually good, or did he just have like a fluke game or something? If you can watch all of his mouse clicks, you can watch what he can see on that, you can't, even though people were trying to do that before, you were watching from such an alien perspective because you don't know what the fog of war is, and you don't really know, was that a fluke? Did he actually intend that? Was it an easy, I've noticed basically, like, a lot of the experts I know say that they thought it was sad last year when they couldn't access that. It was one of the things they were hoping would change it. And even more importantly, the number of pro players I know that when it first was out in like season 9 was saying, I'm watching, like for example, a bunch of AD carries were like, I'm watching Perks play Pro View AD carry. He's fucking amazing, but he's playing it like a mid laner. Like, it's all these interesting details coming out of it. So I hope, for the sake of it's not a game that has replays properly to this day, I think we need that fucking feature. Again, I also profit. Thank you. I don't profit yet, but when I sell, I definitely profit like a motherfucking. Believe that.
I also think it's just egregious that the replays of the professional games are not issued to the public. Like, I remember I was watching a Cadril stream like a few weeks ago, and he was watching a replay of an LEC match, and I was like, where did he get that? And it turns out that he gets given them by LEC, but no one in the public can have them, which is like, it's very hard for people to get better as professional players if they can't watch replays from, the top lane perspective, because the camera's jumping all over everywhere. And as far as I know, they couldn't do ProView because they have to do it in the studio, yes. Which is what I don't know why that is. It's a technical problem. I don't know why. But now that LCS is back in the studio, they can do it again. But I think it's just crazy that I can't subscribe to replays from various regions. I pay for it. Like, I have no problem paying for it. You know what I mean? But it is, it's so bad for the game. It's so bad for the development of players at every single rank that they can't watch professional games from their position's perspective. It's so bad for content that Riot gates who has access to these replays so that you can't show off as an analyst, make a name for yourself doing this kind of content, which would also help the professional scene, because if somebody got really good at it, maybe they get picked up on a broadcast or as a member, an analyst or a coach for a professional team. It's really just a disaster. So I wish there was some level for that as well. And I don't understand the reason behind not letting people have these replays. But I know the teams have been complaining too, because I think the teams didn't get the access to the MSI replays across the world, which is mind-boggling to me. Mind-boggling. The Dota 2 Animajor just ended and was met with great acclaim, except for rushing the ending ceremony. How important is a good event end to an event?
Well, I mean, Interesting they would ask you, Monty, because a little bird told me that when someone called Thorin was trying to cast the end of your fucking event for the final, he charted it all out based on what the normal show time was like, and he did an hour of banter about all the other things, and they tried to do the game. It was about fucking 10 minutes, and I like didn't get to like the maps or anything, and I just go live, like the stream's going live. So you essentially had a scenario where you had to sort of rush your event, right, because of the times or something. So I basically do think that that's one area that they fuck up. Like, one thing that is crazy, it's so crazy, is people wouldn't believe how many years it took for real for people like Riot to have the winners actually do things like, let's have all the photos that all the press can use here. Let's have every player holding the carp and have all the they were just at the fucking event and they walk off stage. Like, what is that? Remember, in football, they do a whole thing. You walk around, you get the medals, you do a whole like stage thing where it's like that. You want all these shots for history. You want the history of the game to be in a lot. So I know to a fan, it's like, whatever, the matches are over. No, like there's another element to it that you want,
Yeah, and I guess the answer is like it's probably one of the least important aspects, honestly.
In the moment, certainly.
But I will also say concurrently that trophy ceremonies are one of the worst parts of esports production across the board. It is one of the shittiest things that we do. And to provide you two different examples, one trophy ceremony that I thought was really good was the 2014 Worlds Finals. So what happened there is, like, I always get very angry when, especially at the important events, people choose to take away the glory of the players because they have some like celebrity that's involved. And I think what Riot did really well was that Imagine Dragons was on stage playing when Samsung White lifted the cup. But it was like, it was cool because the song was there and the music was there and the action was there, but all the focus was on the players. It's actually one of my favorite trophy ceremonies of all time in esports, because I think the celebrity was used well to accentuate the awesomeness of the victory from Samsung White.
And also, spoiler, because I have a great memory for these things. Go and watch it, everyone. Go and watch the Samsung White winning, because it's also the one that was my favorite ever. Because you know how actions say more than words? It's the one that betrayed how Samsung White really worked. Because when this happens, go watch this video. You're going to see exactly what I'm talking about now. Someone, in fact, make a clip and put this voice over it and put like the footage behind it. Basically, right, in that team, everyone's like, oh, everyone in the team's the best and they're all just amazing, blah, blah, blah. When they win, right, the second they win, Dandy and Matter jump up, run to each other for like fuck all the players between them and everything. Because remember, you sit like based on roll or whatever, and just the sort of like, we did it, it was just us, we did it. Like that's almost what they're doing. It's fun.
Looper's just sitting there, no one even says anything to him.
Exactly. He's just like, it's the game over then. And Matt's like, shut up, I didn't tell you to talk yet.
So yeah, that one was great. And then one of the worst ones I've seen was actually from TI, from Internationals, when Liquid won. And it was the most awkward series of events. So it's like they lift the Aegis, and then they're like following karaoke through like the bowels of the stadium. So, maybe you guys haven't been in a lot of you probably haven't been in a lot of like stadium backstage areas like we have in esports, because every time we're at an event, we're just like walking around all the restricted halls and everything. It's just a bunch of concrete and pipes, dude. It looks like shit. The stadium may look amazing.
Like, when they do the intro where the NBA players are walking through just like a weird area with like it's just all concrete pillars. It's just like that.
It's like pallets of like, yeah, it's like pallets of food and, chairs all folded up against the wall. It looks terrible. And so they're like following Kuroki, and they like keep following him for an uncomfortably long time. And Kuroki's like a very awkward human being, so it's even more weird. So they're going through the bowels of the stadium, and then they're like in this tiny like concrete practice room, and they put the champagne there. And then it's a bunch of like Dota nerds just really awkwardly giving themselves champagne showers. It's just like really weird. And then from there, they like follow him outside, and there's like fans like trying to talk to him, and he's being really awkward. And the whole sequence is just frankly like super bizarre. And was really, I mean, TI, as awesome as it is, some of the trophy ceremonies and like what happens after, like the dead mouse thing after TI was really terrible. So they've really struggled in terms of trophy celebrations, but it's hard. It's a hard thing to do right. Ultimately though, I don't think it matters. I think it's just embarrassing. Right? It's just embarrassing. Let's see here. Should a team rule be to basically ignore Reddit threads after a loss? Yes, but you can't stop players from looking if they want to. You just
Problem
have to
is,
internalize that lesson on
it's
your
obviously
own.
impossible. Yeah, I mean, they have the phones, everything. No, here's the problem. As a general rule, yes, like I'm not exaggerating. Anyone who has any level of notoriety on the internet, one of your main goals in life, legitimately, put some time into this, should be to cultivate the ability to not read any comments. Because here's the problem I've realized. It's not that you can't read comments, Monty. It's that you have to pick when you read comments. If you read comments when you're low, when you're tilted, when something, it's just that's when it's gonna be its absolute worst. So what you gotta do is you gotta be like, when your mental's the strongest, that maybe you're in just a fuck around mood where it's like, whatever, I'm not gonna take anything seriously. If you could do that, fine. Now the reason I say I wouldn't like ban it entirely, aside from the fact it's impossible to enforce, is there's also some people out there, and I love them for this, who are just fucked up enough. Like they're like Kobe, like they're like, knowing that people hate on them and that might actually fire them up more, like there's going to be the rare individual who'll do that. But I think on average, most people, it will almost certainly, especially after games or even the day after a game, it'll probably almost certainly affect your mental state on some level.
Let me tell you guys something that has worked through the entirety of the history of humanity. People have realized ever since humans evolved, that if you put somebody in a weakened emotional state, that you can reprogram them. Cults still do this. Scientology does it. It can be used nefariously like that. It can also be used. It has been used in every single culture on planet Earth in kind of youth initiation ceremonies to, weaken people and do rituals in order to turn them into adults that function well within that community or social system. So I will tell you that if you are in a weakened state because you're a hyper-competitive person who feels like shit, and you go in and allow Reddit access to your brain, it will do things to you that you do not understand, and it will reprogram your subconscious and unconscious, and it can fuck with you. It can fuck with your entire ability. Like if I'm a pro player and I know that I made an aggro play, but maybe made a mistake, and I go into a Reddit thread or social media, and I have 1,000 people saying, "Fuck this guy, he screws up," and I know that 9 out of 10 times that play works if I don't make one small mistake, but they're flaming you for being overly aggressive. But that's also your strength as a player, and then it gets to you, and you say, "Oh well, I'm not going to play that aggressively anymore." It ruins your entire identity as a player and can mess you up forever. So I just wouldn't do it.
By the way, any one fan who goes, don't be a pussy, just read it and ignore it, that's because you've never been in that situation. You know the concept of like Dunbar's number, there's like 150 people in your close circle. But what people don't know is it expands out, and the next one's, I don't know, like 400, and then it's like 500, and then it's like, the whole area that you're in, like the fiefdom or whatever, might be like 1,000 max. If you're someone with the Twitter followings of me and Monty, you could get literally like 1,000 people you've never heard of message you. Now, you might think, I could handle that. No, you could handle one person going dickhead in a game. And even then, by the way, you all fucking mouthed and say you want them banned from League of Legends forever. Now imagine 900 people, all wrong, saying nonsense to you, bombarding your brain with that sort of information. Like, you wouldn't be able to handle it. All you need to know is this. Cancel culture proves it. Because some of the people, by the way, there's athletes who are some of the hardest fighters in the world. There's people who are incredibly successful businessmen, actors, musicians. Almost everyone breaks when they get enough social pressure, even if it's at a minimum, like sort of a half apology. How many people really hold out and just say, fuck them up? Almost nobody, by the way. So again, it's one of those scenarios where I would draw the analogy of this. There's a million videos online where someone's filming on public transport, a train in New York or a fucking bus in England, and some guy just out of nowhere, maybe he's drunk on drugs, he's just an antisocial person, starts fighting people or starts doing stuff. Every YouTube comment, that was me, I'd have fucking knocked him out. Everyone on that bus would say the same thing, you idiot. But in the moment, you go, I'm not getting fucking involved with this. I'll let him just keep hitting that guy. I'm staying out of the way. You don't know until you're there. I'm just saying, guys, you don't know. So again, don't just say it. The only reason I ever say it comes with the territory is because it's impossible to get rid of it. So we can't just keep going. But it shouldn't exist. Listen, fuck off to Narnia with your fantasy stories. And then the second one is you do have a choice to not look at it. As I say, if you have to look, the curiosity, wait till you're at your best, mate. Wait until next week. Here's what you should do. Here's a tip for a pro player. I've just figured it out. You have a bad game. You lose on that week. Save the thread. Go back when you win a game really hard in a week or two and read it as comedy and go, oh, look at these fucking idiots. They were all wrong. Didn't I wreck them? Then you might actually be able to handle it. But in the moment, a lot of people, even some of the toughest players in the world, they will break. I'm telling you.
Yeah. And it really is, you have to time it so that your mental fortress is rebuilt, because if the loss has like breached one of the walls and then you just invite a bunch of dumbasses inside your brain, it's very detrimental. It really does fuck with you. And there aren't, it doesn't matter how strong you are or how used to it you are, there are always going to be moments of weakness where you are vulnerable. So I would not recommend it. Great question. LCS has finally gone back to the studio. Has this improved the broadcast in your eyes?
I mean, it has, because the visual elements are 100 times. Like, I thought they had one of the dude. Their broadcast was like an episode of Summoning Insight from like 2014. Some scuffed ass fucking camera shit, and like half the time they're lagging and the camera's not well. Like, are you fucking kidding me? But the only thing is, here's the problem. It's like they've gotten too big dick because they've got that studio. I don't know what these things are with these awkward. It reminds me of in the 90s, they did this on British television, Monty. They'd have these like shows where like the news guy would be trying to walk around like virtual things of like a chart. So I'm like, and you'll see up here, and I walk up to this step, and I'm stepping up here like the pound is going up against the exchange. Like that bit's I find a bit awkward. I don't think they've properly implemented that. It's a cool concept if you could do it, but I don't really actually know that that works. The whole thing, and also that whole thing where they just like stood awkwardly, like slightly away, like something about the vibe on that, it hasn't hit for me at least. I'm not sure what they're going for personally, but obviously to have the ability of that tech, if you're very creative, you could do a lot with that, I think.
Yeah, and I do like some of the implementation. First off, from a content perspective, it's also much better, feels more natural. The new set, I think, is really good. I think that the like lane x lane stuff that they've done, and like game, I would love to do more of that stuff in terms of like the pre-shows, the live pre-shows that you're doing, because I think gamifying it is really cool and was really entertaining. I think the historical stuff that they did, I don't know what they're called, the replay stuff. I think that doing the Misfits SKT series was a really good choice because of how all those players, like a bunch of those players, are now in LCS. So they had immediate access to a bunch of first-person narratives, and that was great. So I think the content is certainly a lot stronger.
Also, I will
from
just
that
say,
perspective.
this is what I love about Riot. Never an ounce of self-awareness. How dare you call that the replay files, you fucking cocksuckers. You don't allow replays. It's 2021. It's 2021. Do you know how many CS 1.6 demos I watched? I'm going to say thousands, Monty. And they don't exist in League of Legends or Valorant for that matter. Are you for real? I know. And you call that the replay files. Those weren't the replay files we were waiting for 10 years. We're waiting for the other ones.
It's just hilarious because like I come from RTS where it's like I spent years in Warcraft 3 watching replays of the best players. Right? It's just I wish I had access to them. It is mind-boggling that my entire career of casting League of Legends, I was never able to watch a single replay of professional games and had to just rely on supposing what was going on places of the map where I couldn't see where the camera was. I
also appreciate, dude, as well, that like Riot are just permanently 5 years behind whatever I tell them to do. Because like, I was telling them for years to do it. Why don't you celebrate the history of the game? And if you got players right now, do a break that. And then it's like 5 years later, they always go, "We have invented." It's like, just give me a break. They're so dumb, aren't they? They're so dumb. I know. Whatever, right? Listen, it's still here though, so fair enough. I'm going to enjoy it. Yeah, do some more.
What's wacky to me is that Valorant doesn't have replays, even though it's new tech.
Yep.
I don't understand. That's the one I really don't understand.
And also, they haven't thought that one through, Monty. If you use stream footage, some TOs might just copyright strike your channel. If you have the replay file, it doesn't happen. Therefore, in CS, Launders downloads the demo and then he plays the demo and does it. He doesn't just take ESL stream and go, well, they might fuck my whole channel, but let's just watch their stream. Like, in that scenario, it's also valuable if you want to build that content creation up, of course, as he was saying with League as well. Like, there's sometimes legal implications behind it. So, yeah, I find it mad, the whole thing. Whatever.
I'm not sure what this means, this question. How much sabotage is required for an NA team to win Worlds?
He means listen, it is some of the insights. If you remember, my classic joke I used to do, I've done it on many desks as well, goes like this. They go, I've been bigging up one team's going to win, it's going to smash. And then they go, the host goes, I'll try a little trick. Yeah, but what would it take for the other team to win? And I go, voodoo, like poison the drink. Like, the old joke. So he's almost making it like that, isn't he? It's like, I wonder if it's actually a callback from like an old school fan, because they're the obvious answers, aren't they?
I mean, an insane amount. Maybe less now. I mean, if Cloud9 can get their shit together and like actually find some level of consistent form, then I mean, also 100 Thieves looks good. So less, I would say less now than last
sure.
split. And probably, hopefully, I would say by Worlds, less than last Worlds. I made a bet with someone that T1 won't make it to Worlds. Ooh, considering that LCK is going to have 4 spots, that might be...
Oh, yeah, let me look, actually. I think that's pretty borderline, I have to say.
Yeah, that's going to be close.
Pretty borderline.
I think. KT also had a pretty big win recently, so maybe don't get excited about KT, but yeah, I think it'd be hard I think Genji and Damwon definitely go to Worlds.
I still don't understand, like, why that's a thing, where it's like, and if your team wins, then you get a spot for not that team. Like, all right, man, to you,
I'm just helping.
I don't know what that means personally. I mean, that means that if G2 had won Worlds, you just get an extra spot for Europe, even though the 4th team might have been shit. What? I'll never understand that. I've just learned, like, Riot's like some fucked up demiurges. Like, they just do whatever they want for their reasons, mate. And us mere mortals are but to intuit what they may be by fucking reading in the entrails of some animal, use some dead former player like Voyboy. Oh, I think that's what they're going for, the Oracle.
I do think that SKT looked a lot better at the end when they actually settled on the starting lineup.
Who knew having all those rookies wasn't the way forward, Monty? Fucking hell.
Who could have known?
Stupid, isn't it? It's so stupid. These are the players we told them to play the whole time.
Well, they had to discover it on their own. Like Riot, it takes a long time for them to follow the obvious directions, but I think it's probably 70% that they'll go to Worlds. I think that's pretty reasonable. What's your favorite fantasy book series to recommend? I'm not really a fantasy guy. I'm gonna be real with you. I'm more of a sci-fi guy, and then also just normal literature, like real literature. I think most people are gonna get mad. I think most fantasy authors are better at world building than they are at the actual act of writing. Yes. I think the Lord of the Rings movies are infinity times better than the books. I think The Two Towers is one of the worst books I have ever read. It is so badly constructed. I think Wheel of Time is so badly written.
No one wants to read songs without music and no one singing them. Are you out of your fucking mind? Dude, you could write all the Beatles lyrics down. They look garbage, wouldn't they? Like, what are you talking about? When they start singing again, oh, I'm out. It's just getting me out. And then they has the gall to do like an asterisk. Oh God, a Tolkien asterisk. If you go into the appendixes, fucking, I'm not here to get a degree in history, motherfucker. I want to know what happens in the story. I know.
Yeah, exactly. I think Tolkien was amazing at world building and, writing about, like, creating these historic, like, languages, histories. But I mean, I like to see that visually, not like, I like to experience that, not read he was really bad at writing.
A Song of Ice and Fire books?
I have not.
I think you would actually enjoy that, because in those ones, actually, like when they do history and stuff, it's just history building up. Basically, his strength is like character development.
Yes.
And I say development, that's the key thing. And because it's all from different POVs, it's different to the show. So actually, there's a rare fantasy one I could recommend. Basically, if you've seen Game of Thrones, you go, but I've already know you don't at all. Because, for example, characters like, first of all, totally different ages, so it radically changes the storylines. Characters like Cersei, who you watch the show, you're like, just a bitch, I want to die. In the book, you actually get like a perspective on them. You get like some POV chapters of them and what they're thinking and how they view people. So like that's a rare example of someone who actually had like an opposite strength almost. Because I agree, all those epic ones like Wheel of Time, it's like, listen, it starts with a cool concept, guys. And then you're about 9 books in, and it's like, and then he had breakfast and then went to sleep that night, and then the next morning, it's a fucking hell, it's a diary. What is this? Where's the story? Where's the story?
It again, Wheel of Time, Robert Jordan was just a bad writer, guys. I don't know what to tell you. Like, the phrase "she crossed her arms beneath her breasts" shows up like 1,000 times in that book. Like, he lacks any ability to actually write. Okay, so big no fan of that one, but I would watch a TV series of it because, again, I think the concept is strong. I've heard good things about the Bryan Sanderson books. I haven't read them. I just don't have it. I mean, honestly, these days I read. I was reading sci-fi books, or I read mostly nonfiction. So I feel like I'm not the target audience for that. Discworld, I've heard Terry Pratchett is good. I've read very little of it.
Yeah, they're very good.
Yeah, I've read some of it. The
problem with that is, I will say, I know it sounds mad, but basically in the UK, I notice people generally don't get this premise. In the UK, Discworld and the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy are considered like the fucking books that you read when you become a teenager. You don't read children's books anymore.
I love Hitchhiker's Guide.
You're not quite ready for the big boy books. So you get these because they introduce you to like subtle humor and clever things.
And I read them when I was a teenager.
And very much like of a period, essentially. So a lot of it, like I read all Discworld books when I was a teenager. I haven't gone back since, you know. So they were pretty good though.
I read Hitchhiker's Guide. I really enjoyed it. I don't know how much I would enjoy it now, but it was wonderful when I was that age.
Was this supposed to only be fantasy we recommended?
Yeah, it was just fantasy books.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of any fantasy books I would recommend. I thought The Hobbit was good. I thought
Hobbit's pretty good. It's a pretty good standalone book. Yeah.
Yeah, as a standalone book, I thought it was pretty good. But again, when I was younger, I used to read fantasy, but I don't even know why I did that. I didn't even like it at the time.
It's just some nerd shit, so everyone does it try, don't they? And also, let's be real, like, this is real. Just like Dungeons and Dragons, there might be a chance that you describe some titties in it or something, you know, like,
exactly.
And the demon witch revealed her 6 breasts. Ooh, like, when you're like 14, that's interesting. It's actually shit when you're like a 30-year-old man, isn't it? Like, I'm not fucking read that shit. I've seen titties.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. With co-streaming getting big, do you see it becoming a thing for non-esports, like the Euros or other sports? Dude, give me the...
It should.
I swear to God, guys, give me the opportunity to co-stream NFL. I will crush that shit. I will get Mina Kimes over to my house. She's a friend of mine, and we will cast the shit out of that. I would love to do that.
I would love to do MMA, dude. Like, I would do the UFC if it was the fights I'm into, you know? I'd love to do that, of course.
Yeah, I really think traditional sports would benefit immensely from co-streaming, because the problem is, like, basically
even superstars would be doing it. Like, you don't think there'd be a scenario where some pop star or something would be like, I'm into this, or like, you know how we in gaming, like Mighty Mouse from the UFC like plays COD or something. Some of these people would they'd do crossovers. Like, but you imagine if, like, I mean, this is a bad example. Like, I guess Shaq would be a terrible commentator, but I tell you what, if Shaq or like Snoop Dogg or something did like a fucking NBA game, you think no one would watch? Of course they would.
Yeah. It'd be fun. I think they should. I think it would be much more appealing it would get them new audiences. Man, NFL has done some of that. Like, they've opened it up for some of the Amazon games on Twitch, but only to, like, you know, people like Ninja and Tim the Tatman and the people, they don't know anything about the game.
Also,
so I'm not sure what value that is. I think you need people who know more about the game and the history of the game in question.
By the way, I want to rig this. Someone just asked next week the same question, but make it about sci-fi, because that's the shit we've actually read. We can give you some good recommendations, but I'm not going to do it now because it's been a fucking amazingly long show, so I'm not going to volunteer it. You better get 25 coins and ask that question, and we'll give you a way better answer next week.
Would you rather be trapped on a deserted island with Reggie or SonicFox? SonicFox 100%. That's not even a question.
That's like fucking Sophie's choice for me, man alive. I don't even know about that. Here's the thing. Sadly, it'd probably be Reggie, because here's the one thing you don't know. Are you ready? Actually, I'll make everyone really upset now, Monty.
Oh,
do you want to know something?
No.
When I've interacted with Reginald, I alpha the fuck out of him, and he literally just does everything I say and acts very politely at all times. I know all plebs are going, no, Jason, he's a millionaire, he's going cleaner. Nah, you haven't seen it. There's a reason. Put it this way, I'll give you a little hint. All the people who don't come on my shows are like that. They're not bossing me, so that goes without saying. The difference is, he'd be fucking doing whatever I say, making me a little hot out of coconuts or something, wouldn't he?
What piece of esports? For the final one, guys. What piece of esports history will get banned to be discussed on Riot's co-streams first/next? I don't even know what they've banned already. I imagine they banned certain things. I imagine talking about my ban is probably illegal.
For sure.
Probably any ruling they make at any time ever.
Yeah.
Obvious. And probably also not even just on co-streams, but probably the people who co-stream can't talk about that anywhere, or they won't. Like, here's the thing about the whole co-streaming thing.
Richard Lewis as well. There's probably a bunch of things on there. I bet there's probably a bunch. Yeah.
Here's the thing. Because of the nature of the co-streaming relationship that we discussed at the top of the show that Riot has set up, it's the problem is that even if they don't explicitly ban things, they have created a scenario where losing millions of dollars to those co-streamers will prevent them automatically from doing anything that is even remotely critical. Because the fear is there. So they've instilled the fear. It's a rule by fear, and that's just how it's going to be. So I would imagine anything remotely controversial will not be outright banned, because Riot will never say to those people, you can't talk about this, because if that were to leak to the press, it would obviously cause a huge outrage. But they are also never going to, the rule, the system they've created enforces the rules by itself.
Yeah, it just incentivizes or de-incentivizes you, like I say.
So, yeah, it's certainly a strange situation. Okay, well, thank you. This has been a very long show, but very interesting to hear Empyre and Deficio's takes on things. Thanks for the Grog coin holders. You too can join that. Remember, we are going to be back Mondays, 11 a.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central European time for you guys on the Inside on Esports Twitch channel. VOD comes out next day on YouTube. So we'll see you around. Till next week,